The prairie heat hit Evelyn like a slap the moment she stepped off the train. It wasn't the gentle warmth of Philadelphia summers she remembered, those soft afternoons when she'd sit in her father's study reading novels about Western adventure. This was something vicious, the kind of heat that made breathing feel like work, that turned the air itself into something you had to push through. Iron Hollow's platform was nothing but weathered planks and splitting wood. No covered pavilion, no benches, just raw sun and a handful of rough men staring at her like she was a circus exhibit. Evelyn kept her chin up, her traveling dress already sticking to her back beneath the fitted jacket. She'd worn her best outfit, deep green wool with black trim, the skirt carefully pressed despite 3 days of rail travel. She'd wanted to look proper when Thomas saw her, wanted him to know he'd chosen well. The irony burned worse than the sun. Miss Mercer? A stocky man with a silver badge approached, his boots kicking up dust. He had the kind face of someone who'd delivered bad news before and hated every minute of it. Sheriff Harding. He removed his hat, revealing a sunburned scalp. I got your telegram yesterday. Evelyn's gloved hands tightened on her carpet bag. Then you know why I'm here. Thomas Brennan sent for me. We're to be married. The sheriff's expression shifted, sympathy mixed with something that looked like resignation. Ma'am, I'm afraid there's been a situation. A situation. Evelyn's voice stayed level, but something cold was spreading through her chest. Sheriff, I've traveled 1,700 miles. I've spent the last of my savings on this journey. I don't need situations. I need my fiancée. Thomas Brennan left Iron Hollow 4 months ago. The words landed like stones. He wouldn't. But even as Evelyn said it, doubt crept in. She barely knew the man. 6 letters over 8 months, promises of land, prosperity, a good life in the West. We had an agreement. You're the 4th woman he brought out here with promises. The sheriff's voice was gentle but firm. Always the same story. Marry me, build a life, blah blah. Then he'd borrow money against their names, clean out their travel funds, and disappear before the ceremony. Evelyn felt the platform tilt beneath her feet. 4 women. You're just the first one who sent a telegram ahead. He reached into his vest pocket, pulled out a wrinkled envelope. He left this with the postmaster, said to give it to any woman asking for Thomas Brennan. She took it with numb fingers. The envelope wasn't even sealed properly. Inside, a single line in rushed handwriting. Sorry, had to move on. Don't wait. That was it. No explanation, no apology beyond that one hollow word. Just 7 syllables to sum up the collapse of everything she'd risked. There's a boarding house on 2nd Street, the sheriff was saying. Mrs. Chen runs a clean establishment. She'll give you a fair rate while you sort things out. Sort things out. Evelyn heard herself laugh, a bitter sound. And what exactly am I sorting? I have $17, Sheriff. 17. The return ticket costs 40. You got family back east? She thought of Philadelphia. Her father's disappointment when she'd announced her engagement to a Western settler. Her mother's tears. The whispers at church. Evelyn Mercer running off with some frontier dreamer. She'll be back before Christmas. Mark my words. No, Evelyn said quietly. I don't. The sheriff shifted his weight, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Listen, Miss Mercer, I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, but Iron Hollow isn't Philadelphia. It's rough out here. A woman alone, I'm aware of my situation. Evelyn straightened her spine, calling on every ounce of composure her mother had drilled into her during years of deportment lessons. Thank you for your honesty, Sheriff. I'll manage. She picked up her carpet bag and trunk, refusing to meet the eyes of the men still watching from the general store's porch. Her heels clicked against the wooden planks as she walked toward the dusty main street, each step feeling like walking through deep water. The town wasn't much. One central street with buildings that looked like they'd been thrown together by people in a hurry to get rich. A saloon with faded paint, a general store, a bank that seemed too grand for the settlement around it, and everywhere, the dust. It coated everything. Windows, signs, the horses tied along the hitching posts. This was supposed to be her new home, her fresh start, the adventure she'd dreamed about while trapped in her father's stuffy house, watching her friends marry Philadelphia lawyers and bankers, settling into lives of quiet predictability. Be careful what you wish for, she thought bitterly. The boarding house was easy to find, a 2-story structure that leaned slightly to the left, its paint peeling in long strips. A hand-lettered sign read Chen's Rooms, Clean Beds, Fair Prices. Mrs. Chen turned out to be a tiny Chinese woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She looked Evelyn up and down, taking in the expensive traveling dress, the quality leather bag, the face trying hard not to crumble. "Thomas Brennan?" Mrs. Chen asked. Evelyn blinked. "How did you—" "Honey, you're the fourth one through that door in 2 years." Mrs. Chen's English carried a thick accent, but her meaning was crystal clear. "That man's a bastard. $2 a night includes breakfast. You pay weekly in advance." "I can't afford weekly." Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment. "You run from family?" "No." Evelyn set down her bags. "I ran toward something. I just didn't know it was a mirage." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "You work hard? You clean?" "I kept my father's entire household running after my mother passed. I can cook, clean, manage accounts." "Can you scrub floors on your knees, wash sheets, empty chamber pots?" Evelyn felt her face flush. She'd done those things at home, but always with the understanding that she was the lady of the house, not the help. "Yes." "Then you work for your room, 4 hours every morning. Deal?" It wasn't much, but it was something. "Deal." Mrs. Chen showed her to a cramped room on the second floor. The bed was narrow, the wash basin chipped, the single window overlooked an alley where chickens scratched in the dirt. But it was clean, and right now, that felt like luxury. Evelyn sat on the bed after Mrs. Chen left, still wearing her traveling clothes, and stared at the bare walls. She did not cry. She'd cried enough on the train, in those dark moments between stations when the reality of what she'd done had crashed over her. Cried for the foolishness of trusting a stranger. Cried for the life she'd abandoned so recklessly. Cried because she was terrified and alone and so stupid. But she wouldn't cry now. Tears wouldn't put money in her pocket or get her home. She changed into a simpler dress, unpacked her few belongings, and went downstairs to begin her first shift of work. The next 3 days passed in a blur of mindless labor. Evelyn scrubbed floors until her knees ached and her hands cracked. She washed sheets in scalding water, her arms burning. She served meals to rough men who looked through her like she was furniture, their conversations full of mining claims and cattle prices and things that meant nothing to her. At night, she counted her money. $17. 16. 15.70 after buying a bar of soap and a small bottle of liniment for her aching back. The math was simple and cruel. At this rate, she'd need 3 months to earn enough for a ticket home. 3 months of scrubbing and hauling and fading into the background of someone else's life. On the fourth morning, while sweeping the front porch, Evelyn heard the murmur of voices from inside the boarding house common room. Another one of Brennan's victims. "Poor girl. Came all the way from Philadelphia, I heard." Well, what did she expect, coming west to marry a stranger? Evelyn's hands tightened on the broom handle. She wanted to storm inside to tell those gossiping women that she'd been brave, that she'd taken a risk, that at least she'd tried to build something instead of rotting away in drawing rooms talking about other people's failures. But she didn't, because they were right. She had been a fool. She went back to sweeping. That afternoon, as she was hanging sheets on the line behind the boarding house, a commotion erupted on the main street. Horses, shouting, the sound of wagon wheels clattering over packed earth. Evelyn looked up to see a freight wagon rolling past, loaded with supplies. And riding beside it on a massive chestnut gelding was a man who made everyone else on the street look small. He wasn't particularly tall, maybe 6 feet, but he carried himself with the kind of presence that demanded attention without asking for it. Dark hair, strong jaw, a scar that ran from his left temple to his cheekbone. He wore simple range clothes, canvas pants, a faded blue shirt, a wide-brimmed hat pushed back on his head. But it was his eyes that caught Evelyn's attention. Even from a distance, she could see they were gray, storm cloud gray, the kind of eyes that had seen things and remembered them. "That's Cole Ryder," Mrs. Chen said, appearing beside Evelyn with a basket of dry linens. "Silver Ridge Ranch, best operation within 50 miles. He looks—" Evelyn searched for the right word. "Dangerous?" Mrs. Chen smiled. "He is, but fair. Treats his people right, pays honest wages, doesn't tolerate nonsense." The man, Cole Ryder, said something to the freight driver, then turned his horse toward the general store. He moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in his body, in his world. Evelyn felt a strange pang of envy. What would it be like to belong somewhere so completely? To move through space without second-guessing every step? She went back to hanging sheets. That evening, as she was helping Mrs. Chen prepare dinner, the older woman said casually, "Cole Ryder is looking for someone." Evelyn barely heard her, focused on peeling potatoes. His housekeeper ran off last month. Married some prospector headed to Colorado. He needs someone to manage the ranch house. Cook, clean, keep things organized. Evelyn's hand stilled. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I like you. You work hard, don't complain. Too good to waste scrubbing my floors forever." Mrs. Chen paused. "It's remote work. Silver Ridge is 8 miles from town. You'd live on the ranch, but he pays $30 a month plus room and board." $30. In 3 months, Evelyn could earn enough to go home and still have money left over. Maybe enough to start fresh somewhere else, somewhere people didn't know about Thomas Brennan and his string of abandoned women. "I don't know anything about ranch life," Evelyn said slowly. "You know how to run a household. That's what he needs." Mrs. Chen returned to chopping onions. "He'll be at the general store tomorrow morning, loading supplies. If you're interested, be there at 7. Evelyn lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Taking the job meant staying in Iron Hollow longer, meant admitting she couldn't just pretend this disaster had never happened and run back east. But it also meant earning real money, building a real escape. And honestly, what was waiting for her in Philadelphia? Her father's disappointment? The pitying looks from neighbors who'd watched her leave with such pride? At least here, she could work. She could be useful. She could prove, if only to herself, that she wasn't completely helpless. When dawn broke gray and dusty over Iron Hollow, Evelyn was already awake. She dressed in her plainest outfit, a brown cotton dress with a high collar, sturdy boots she'd bought from the general store with some of her dwindling funds. She braided her dark hair and pinned it tightly, trying to look competent and professional. The general store was already busy when she arrived. Ranchers and ranch hands loading supplies into wagons, everyone moving with the efficient hurry of people who had work waiting. Cole Ryder stood near a wagon, checking items against a list. Up close, he was even more imposing. The scar on his face was old but prominent, and his hands were scarred too, the hands of someone who'd worked hard and fought harder. Evelyn's courage almost failed her. This man looked like he belonged in the wilderness. What would he want with a Philadelphia woman who'd never even seen a ranch? But she'd come this far. Might as well finish it. She walked up to him, her heart hammering. "Mr. Ryder?" He turned, and those gray eyes settled on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Yes?" "My name is Evelyn Mercer. I understand you're looking for a housekeeper." His gaze moved over her, not lingering anywhere inappropriate, but assessing, taking in her dress, her posture, the way she held herself. "You're Brennan's latest." It wasn't a question. Of course he knew. Everyone knew. "I was," Evelyn said, keeping her voice steady. "Now I'm someone looking for honest work." "You know anything about ranch life?" "No, but I know how to manage a household. I can cook, clean, organize, keep accounts. I'm a hard worker, and I learn fast." Silver Ridge is isolated, 8 miles from town, no neighbors close by. It's me and my ranch hand Mason. You'd be alone with us most of the time. There was no threat in his words, just a statement of fact. But Evelyn understood what he was really asking. Could she trust him? Could she handle the isolation? "I've already been abandoned by one man who made promises," Evelyn said quietly. "I'm not eager to repeat the experience, but I need work, and I need it now. If you're offering honest wages for honest labor, I'm interested. If not, I'll find something else." Something shifted in Cole Ryder's expression. Not quite a smile, but something warmer than the neutral assessment he'd been giving her. $30 a month, he said, room and board included. You keep the house clean, cook meals, manage supplies. I need someone organized who won't fall apart at the first difficulty. This isn't easy work. I don't need easy. I need real. He studied her for another long moment, then nodded. Be ready to leave in an hour. Bring whatever you have. We head out before the heat gets worse. Evelyn's heart leaped. I'm hired. You're hired. But Miss Mercer? He met her eyes directly. I don't tolerate quitters. You take this job, you commit to at least 3 months. I can't keep training people who run off after 2 weeks. Can you do that? 3 months? Exactly the time she needed to earn her passage home. Yes, Evelyn said. I can do that. An hour later, she was perched on the bench of Cole Ryder's supply wagon, her carpetbag and trunk loaded in the back, watching Iron Hollow disappear behind a curtain of dust. She had no idea what she was riding toward, but at least she was moving forward, and right now, that was enough. Balsique. The road to Silver Ridge was barely a road at all, more like a suggestion carved through endless prairie grass. The wagon jolted over rocks and through shallow creeks while the sun climbed higher, turning the air thick and heavy. Cole Ryder didn't talk much. He drove with easy competence, occasionally pointing out landmarks Evelyn couldn't distinguish from any other cluster of rocks or stands of scraggly trees. The silence should have been uncomfortable, but somehow it wasn't. He seemed like a man who didn't waste words, and Evelyn found herself respecting that. After about an hour, he finally spoke. You really came all the way from Philadelphia for Thomas Brennan? Yes. Evelyn saw no point in lying or sugarcoating. I answered his advertisement in the newspaper. He wrote beautiful letters, made promises about building a life together, about the opportunities in the West. She laughed without humor. I suppose he was a better writer than a human being. He was a con artist. Cole's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. Ran the same scheme in Kansas before he came here. Sheriff should have run him out of town the first time, but Brennan was clever, always stayed just on the right side of legal. How do you know all this? I pay attention. Can't run a ranch successfully without knowing who's honest and who's not. He glanced at her. For what it's worth, you weren't stupid. Lots of women come west to marry strangers. Most of the time it works out fine. You just got unlucky. Evelyn felt an unexpected surge of gratitude. Not pity, not condescension, just a simple acknowledgement that she'd taken a risk and it hadn't panned out. Thank you for saying that. I don't say things I don't mean. They fell back into silence, and Evelyn watched the landscape change. The prairie began to roll and dip, introducing hills and shallow valleys. In the distance, mountains rose like purple shadows against the sky. Is it always this hot? She asked. This is spring. Wait until summer. But there was the faintest hint of humor in his voice. Another mile passed. Then Cole said, The job's real, Miss Mercer, but I need to be clear about expectations. I'm gone most days working the ranch. Mason handles the cattle and horses. You'll be in the house alone a lot. If that bothers you. It doesn't. Evelyn surprised herself with how quickly she answered. I'm used to solitude. I prefer it to... She gestured vaguely back toward Iron Hollow. To people gossiping about you? She felt her face heat. Does everyone know? Small town. People talk. He paused. But at Silver Ridge, nobody cares about your past except you. Fresh start if you want it. Fresh start. The words felt almost dangerous to hope for. They crested a rise, and suddenly the valley opened before them. A creek wound through the center, lined with cottonwood trees. Green grass spread across the bottomland, and scattered across the slopes were cattle, more than Evelyn had ever seen in one place. And there, nestled against the eastern hillside, where the morning sun would hit it first, sat the ranch house. It was larger than she'd expected. A sprawling single-story structure built from timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. The roof looked solid, the windows intact. Behind it stood a massive barn, several corrals, and various outbuildings. Welcome to Silver Ridge, Cole said. As they rolled down into the valley, Evelyn could see more details. The ranch wasn't fancy, but it was well maintained. Someone had built this place to last. The fences were straight and strong. The barn doors hung properly. Even the smallest shed had been constructed with care. They pulled up in front of the house, and a young man emerged from the barn, barely 20, with sandy hair and a friendly face. This had to be Mason. Boss, he called, jogging over. Then he saw Evelyn and stopped short. Oh, hello. This is Miss Mercer, Cole said, climbing down from the wagon. She's our new housekeeper, Mason Reed. Meet Evelyn Mercer. Ma'am. Mason tipped his hat, his cheeks flushing slightly. Welcome to Silver Ridge. Thank you. Evelyn accepted Cole's hand to climb down from the wagon, trying not to show how stiff and sore she was from the journey. Mason, help Miss Mercer get her things inside. I'll start unloading the supplies. Cole was already moving toward the wagon bed, all business. Mason grabbed Evelyn's trunk easily, the boy was stronger than he looked, and led her toward the house. I hope you like it here, ma'am. It's been kind of chaotic since Sarah left. Mr. Ryder's been trying to cook, and, well, he made a face. Let's just say we've been eating a lot of beans and jerky. Despite everything, Evelyn smiled. I think I can improve on that. The inside of the ranch house was both better and worse than she'd expected. The main room was spacious, with a large fireplace and sturdy furniture, but dust covered everything. Dirty dishes were piled in the kitchen, and she spotted what looked like a man's attempt at darning socks abandoned on the table. I'll take your things to the housekeeper's room, Mason said, heading down a short hallway. It's small, but it's got a good window. The room turned out to be tiny, but private. A narrow bed, a chest of drawers, a washstand, and that promised window overlooking the creek. After the cramped quarters at Mrs. Chen's boarding house, it felt almost luxurious. Thank you, Mason. Evelyn set her carpet bag on the bed. Yes, ma'am. I'll let you settle in. He backed toward the door, then paused. Miss Mercer? I'm glad you're here. Mr. Ryder won't say it, but he's been pretty stressed trying to manage everything himself. After Mason left, Evelyn stood in the small room and took a deep breath. This was it. Her temporary home. The place where she'd work for 3 months, save her money, and then leave for somewhere. Anywhere but Iron Hollow. She changed into her work dress, the plainest, sturdiest one she owned, and tied her hair back with a kerchief. Then she rolled up her sleeves and went back to the main room. Time to get started. She began with the dishes, heating water, and scrubbing away days of neglect. Then she swept the floors, starting with the corners and working her way out. She beat the dust from the furniture, wiped down surfaces, and organized the kitchen supplies into some semblance of order. By the time the sun reached its peak, she was sweating through her dress and her back ached, but the main room looked almost habitable. Cole came in through the front door, stopped, and stared. I know it's not finished, Evelyn said quickly, but I thought I'd start with the main areas. It looks good. He removed his hat, and she realized it was the first time she'd seen him without it. His hair was dark and slightly too long, curling at the collar. Really good. Thank you. It's my job. Still. He hung his hat on a peg by the door. You work fast. I promised you I would. Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron. I was about to start on lunch. Is there anything you don't eat? Miss Mercer, after 3 weeks of my cooking, will eat anything that doesn't try to crawl off the plate. From behind him, Mason's voice called, That's the truth. Evelyn found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. I'll see what I can do. She dug through the supplies and found basics. Flour, salt, dried beans that had been properly soaked, some bacon, eggs, and a precious half-wheel of cheese. Not much, but enough. While she worked, Cole and Mason came and went, carrying supplies, discussing fence repairs and cattle movements in the easy shorthand of people who'd worked together a long time. Their voices became a comfortable backdrop to her cooking. An hour later, she called them to the table. It wasn't fancy, just beans cooked with bacon until they were soft and savory, fried eggs, fresh biscuits that she'd managed to coax from the temperamental oven, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Mason took one bite of the biscuits and actually groaned. Oh my God. Language, Cole said automatically, but he was eating with the focused intensity of a truly hungry man. Evelyn sat at the far end of the table, picking at her own food, watching them eat. Something warm was growing in her chest. Not happiness exactly, but something close to satisfaction. She'd done this. She'd created something useful, something that made these men's lives a little better. It wasn't much, but it was real. Miss Mercer, Cole said, breaking into her thoughts. These are excellent biscuits. Thank you. I mean it. Best I've had in... Hell, I don't even remember. He set down his fork. I think this arrangement is going to work out fine. Evelyn met his eyes across the table, those storm gray eyes that seemed to see straight through all her defenses. I hope so. That night, lying in her narrow bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the prairie night, wind in the grass, the distant cry of something wild, the creak of the house settling, Evelyn took stock of her situation. She was 8 miles from civilization, living with 2 men she barely knew, in a place so remote that help would be hours away if she needed it. She should have been terrified, but instead she felt something else, something tentative and fragile, like a green shoot pushing through hard soil. She felt possibility. Thomas Brennan had been a lie. Philadelphia had been a trap of expectations and disappointment. Even this job was supposed to be temporary, just a means to an end. But lying there in the darkness, Evelyn wondered, what if she didn't run away? What if, for once in her carefully controlled life, she stayed and fought for something? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Outside, a coyote howled at the moon. Evelyn closed her eyes and let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might feel like to belong to this wild, harsh, beautiful place. Then sleep claimed her, and she dreamed of endless horizons stretching toward a future she couldn't yet see. The first week at Silver Ridge passed in a rhythm Evelyn hadn't expected to find comforting. She woke before dawn to the sound of roosters and started coffee, while the sky turned from black to gray to pink. By the time Cole and Mason came in from the barn, breakfast was ready. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, whatever she could make from their limited supplies. The men ate quickly, spoke little, and disappeared into the work of the ranch, and Evelyn was left with the house. She attacked it with a determination that surprised even herself. Years of managing her father's Philadelphia household had taught her efficiency, but this was different. There was no staff to delegate to, no one to supervise, just her and the accumulated neglect of months. The kitchen came first. She scrubbed every surface until her knuckles were raw, organized the pantry with military precision, and made a detailed list of supplies they needed. Then she moved to the main room, washing windows until they actually let light through, beating rugs until clouds of dust made her cough, mending curtains that had been torn and ignored. On the third day, while she was on her hands and knees scrubbing the floorboards, Cole came in unexpectedly. She looked up, pushing sweat-dampened hair from her face, suddenly aware of how she must look. Dress soaked through, face flushed, dirt under her fingernails. "Sorry," he said, stopping in the doorway. "Didn't mean to startle you. Just needed to grab the ranch ledger." "It's your house." Evelyn sat back on her heels. "You don't need to apologize." He crossed to the desk in the corner, pulled out a leather-bound book, then paused. "You don't have to work yourself to death, Miss Mercer. The house was neglected, I know, but I prefer to be useful." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "I'm being paid to manage this household. I intend to do it properly." Something flickered in his expression. Not offense, but understanding. "Fair enough. Just don't forget to eat. Mason said you skipped lunch yesterday." He left before she could respond, and Evelyn sat there on the floor, bucket of dirty water beside her, feeling oddly exposed. When was the last time someone had noticed whether she'd eaten? That evening, she made a proper dinner, roasted chicken with herbs she'd found growing wild near the creek, potatoes, beans cooked with molasses. She set the table carefully, using the decent plates she'd found in the back of the cupboard, and even picked a handful of wildflowers for the center. When Cole and Mason came in, both men stopped and stared. "This looks—" Mason searched for words. "This looks like a real dinner." "It is a real dinner." Evelyn tried not to sound defensive. "Sit down before it gets cold." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the clink of forks on plates. Then Mason said, "Miss Mercer, this is incredible. Where'd you learn to cook like this?" "My mother taught me before she passed. She believed every woman should know how to run a proper household, regardless of station." Evelyn cut her chicken into precise pieces. "At the time, I thought it was old-fashioned. Now I'm grateful." "Well, we're grateful too." Mason grinned at her. "Mr. Ryder's cooking is, well, it keeps you alive, but that's about all you can say for it." "I can hear you," Cole said dryly. "I know. That's why I'm being nice about it." Despite herself, Evelyn smiled. There was an easy warmth between the two men that reminded her of brothers, though they clearly weren't related. Cole had to be in his mid-30s, Mason barely out of his teens. "How long have you two worked together?" she asked. 4 years, Mason said. "I showed up here half-starved, looking for work. Didn't know a damn thing about ranching. Mr. Ryder took me on anyway, taught me everything." "Language," Cole said again, but there was affection in it. "Sorry, ma'am." Mason didn't look particularly sorry. "Point is, this ranch saved my life. I was headed down a bad path before I got here." Evelyn wanted to ask more. What kind of bad path? where he'd come from. But Cole's expression had closed off slightly, and she recognized the signal. Some stories weren't meant to be shared at the dinner table. "Well," she said instead, "I'm glad you both gave me a chance too. I know I'm not exactly typical ranch help." "You're doing fine." Cole met her eyes across the table. "Better than fine. The house already looks different." It was a small compliment delivered in his typically understated way, but something warm bloomed in Evelyn's chest anyway. After dinner, while she was washing dishes, Mason appeared at her elbow with a towel. "I'll dry." "You don't have to do that. I want to. Besides, Mr. Ryder's doing the books, which means he's going to be grumpy for the next hour. Better to stay out of his way." They worked in companionable silence for a while. Then Mason said quietly, "Can I ask you something? You don't have to answer if you don't want." Evelyn braced herself. "All right." "Why'd you stay? After Brennan ran out on you, I mean. Most women would have found a way back east as fast as possible." "Most women probably have somewhere to go back to." Evelyn scrubbed at a stubborn spot on a plate. "I don't. Not really. My father made it clear when I left that I was making a mistake. Going back would just prove him right." "So you're staying out of spite?" She laughed, surprised by his directness. "Maybe a little, but also, I don't know. Philadelphia felt like a cage. Everything was decided for me before I was born. What kind of woman I should be, who I should marry, how I should spend my life. Coming west was supposed to be different, an adventure. Didn't quite work out that way." "No, but maybe that's all right." She handed him the clean plate. "Maybe the adventure isn't about the man I was supposed to marry. Maybe it's about what happens next." Mason dried the plate thoughtfully. "You know, Miss Mercer, I think you're going to fit in here just fine." The second week brought new challenges. Evelyn discovered that running a ranch household was wildly different from managing a city home. She had to learn which supplies lasted and which spoiled quickly in the heat. She had to figure out how to cook for men who burned thousands of calories a day doing physical labor. She had to adapt recipes when ingredients weren't available, and she had to get used to the isolation. Silver Ridge wasn't just remote, it was profoundly alone. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. The town was an hour's ride. Some days the only people she saw were Cole and Mason, and they were gone from sunrise to sunset. At first the silence was oppressive. In Philadelphia there had always been noise, carriages in the street, neighbors calling to each other, the constant hum of city life. Here, the quiet was so complete it felt physical. But gradually, Evelyn began to hear the subtler sounds. Wind moving through grass, birds calling from the cottonwoods, the creek running over stones, the low sound of cattle in the distance. The land was talking. She just had to learn its language. On her 10th day at Silver Ridge, Cole came in at noon looking troubled. "Problem?" Evelyn asked, setting aside the mending she'd been working on. "Mason and I need to move cattle to the upper pasture. It's a 2-day job. We'll have to camp out overnight." He hesitated. "That means you'll be alone here." "I see. If you're not comfortable with that, we can delay it. But the grass is ready now, and Mr. Ryder," Evelyn stood meeting his eyes, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm a grown woman. I can manage a house by myself for 2 days. It's not the house I'm worried about." He gestured toward the window. "It's out there. If something happens, a fire, an injury, trouble, you'd be on your own for hours before anyone could reach you." Evelyn felt a chill despite the warm room. She hadn't thought about that. In the city, help was always minutes away. Here she could scream until her lungs gave out and no one would hear. But she refused to let fear control her. Not after coming this far. "Then you'll have to teach me what to do," she said firmly. "Show me how to handle emergencies. I'm not helpless, Mr. Ryder. I just need information." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or approval. "All right, come with me." He spent the next hour showing her things she'd never imagined needing to know. How to load and fire the rifle he kept above the door, where the medical supplies were, and how to treat basic injuries. How to spot the signs of a developing storm, where the emergency water was stored. What to do if a fire started. "If someone comes to the ranch while we're gone," Cole said, his tone serious, "you don't let them in. I don't care who they are or what they say they need. You stay inside, keep the rifle close, and wait for us to come back." You're frightening me. Good. Fear keeps you alive out here. He checked the rifle's chamber one more time, then handed it to her. Most people are honest, but some aren't, and a woman alone is vulnerable. I need you to understand that. Evelyn held the rifle, feeling its weight, its cold metal reality. I understand. I wouldn't leave you if I didn't think you could handle it, but you need to be smart. They left before dawn the next morning. Evelyn watched from the porch as they rode out, driving a small herd of cattle ahead of them. Mason waved. Cole just nodded, his face already focused on the work ahead. Then they were gone, and Evelyn was truly alone. The first few hours weren't bad. She threw herself into work, cleaning, baking bread, organizing the storage room. But as the afternoon wore on and the sun began its slow descent, the isolation pressed in. Every sound became potentially threatening. The wind rattling a loose shutter, a coyote calling in the hills, the creak of settling wood. Evelyn forced herself to stay calm. She made dinner for one, ate at the big table that felt too empty, and washed her single plate. Then she sat in the main room with the rifle across her lap, a book open on her knee that she couldn't quite focus on. This was foolish. She was perfectly safe. Nothing was going to happen. But as darkness fell completely and the prairie night closed in around the ranch, Evelyn understood something new about the West. It wasn't just harsh. It was indifferent. The land didn't care if she lived or died. It would go on exactly the same either way. That should have been terrifying. Instead, it was oddly liberating. She'd spent her whole life trying to meet other people's expectations, trying to be proper and acceptable and good. But the prairie didn't expect anything. It just was. Maybe she could be the same way. Just be. Without apology or explanation. The night passed without incident. Evelyn woke the next morning stiff from sleeping in the chair, but proud of herself for not panicking. She went about her day, tended the chickens, hauled water from the well, and had fresh stew waiting when Cole and Mason returned at sunset. "Everything all right?" Cole asked, scanning her face. "Fine," Evelyn said, and she meant it. Something had shifted in her during those lonely hours. Some last piece of the frightened Philadelphia girl had finally burned away, leaving something harder beneath. The third week, Evelyn asked if she could ride into town with them for supplies. "Not sure that's a good idea," Cole said, frowning at his coffee. "Why not? I need to order specific supplies for the house. I can be more efficient if I select them myself." "It's not about efficiency." He set down his cup. "People in Iron Hollow talk. You showing up with me is going to start rumors. Let them talk. I'm not ashamed of earning honest wages." Mason cleared his throat. "Miss Mercer, it's not that simple. There are some folks in town who, well, they didn't like it when you took this job. They think a woman living out here with 2 unmarried men is improper." Evelyn felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That's ridiculous. I'm the housekeeper. It's a legitimate position." "We know that," Cole said, "but small towns have long memories and short imaginations. I'm trying to protect your reputation." "My reputation was destroyed the moment Thomas Brennan left me standing on that platform. At least now I'm earning my way honestly." Evelyn stood, gathering their empty plates with sharp movements. "If you won't take me, I'll walk. It's only 8 miles. "In this heat? You'd collapse halfway there." "Then I suggest you let me ride in the wagon." Cole and Mason exchanged glances. Then Cole sighed. "You're stubborn, you know that?" "Yes, I've been told." They left for town after breakfast. Evelyn perched on the wagon bench between the two men. The ride took over an hour, and with each mile, Evelyn felt her determination waver slightly. What if Cole was right? What if people did talk? She'd already been humiliated once in Iron Hollow. Did she really want to invite more judgment? But then she thought about the girl who'd stepped off that train 3 weeks ago, frightened, ashamed, ready to hide until she could escape. That girl would have stayed at the ranch, would have let fear dictate her choices. Evelyn was tired of being that girl. Iron Hollow looked exactly the same, dusty, rough, thrown together. But this time, Evelyn held her head high as they rolled down the main street. She didn't hide or shrink. She looked people directly in the eye. Some looked away. Others stared with open curiosity. A few women whispered to each other behind their hands. Let them whisper. Cole stopped the wagon in front of the general store. "We'll be about an hour loading supplies. Meet back here? Perfect." Evelyn climbed down before he could help her, smoothing her skirts. The general store was dim and crowded with goods. Mr. Thornton, the proprietor, greeted her with careful politeness. "Miss Mercer, what can I do for you?" She handed him her list. "I need these items for Silver Ridge Ranch. Some I'll take today. Others can be included in Mr. Ryder's regular order." He scanned the list, his eyebrows rising slightly. "This is quite specific. Real butter, not lard, fresh herbs, fancy coffee." Mr. Ryder and Mason work hard. They deserve quality meals. Evelyn kept her voice level. "Can you fill the order or not?" "I can fill it, just surprised is all. Most ranch cooks make do with basics." "I'm not most ranch cooks." While Mr. Thornton gathered items, Evelyn browsed the store. She was examining fabric. Maybe she could make new curtains for the main room, when a voice like cold syrup spoke behind her. "Well, well, the abandoned bride playing house at Silver Ridge." Evelyn turned to find a woman standing there, beautiful in a calculated way. Blonde hair perfectly styled despite the heat, expensive dress that had no business being worn in a frontier town, and eyes like blue ice. "I don't believe we've met," Evelyn said carefully. "Vivian Blackwell." The woman smiled, showing too many teeth. "My father owns the bank here, and several other businesses. We're quite influential in Iron Hollow." "How nice for you." "I couldn't help noticing you arrived with Cole Ryder." Vivian's tone was light, but there was steel underneath. "Living at his ranch, I understand?" "I'm his housekeeper." "Of course you are." Vivian's smile didn't waver. "How resourceful of you." When a mail-order bride scheme falls through, simply move in with the most eligible bachelor in the territory. Clever. Evelyn felt her face burn, but she refused to look away. "I work for my wages, Miss Blackwell. Perhaps you're unfamiliar with the concept." The smile finally cracked. "You should be careful, Miss Mercer. Cole Ryder is not the man you think he is. He's dangerous, and he's certainly not looking for a wife, especially not some desperate Eastern woman with nowhere else to go." "Then it's fortunate I'm not looking for a husband. Once was enough for me, thank you. We'll see how long that lasts." Vivian adjusted her parasol. "Enjoy your little domestic fantasy while it lasts. But remember, some men are meant for women of quality and breeding, and some are meant for, well, the help." She swept out of the store, leaving the sharp scent of expensive perfume in her wake. Evelyn stood there, hands shaking, rage and humiliation burning through her. The worst part was that Vivian had struck close to home. Evelyn was desperate. She was living at Cole's ranch, and she was nothing more than hired help. But that didn't give anyone the right to treat her like garbage. "Don't mind Miss Vivian," Mr. Thornton said quietly, appearing at her elbow with her supplies. "She's had her cap set at Cole Ryder for years. Doesn't take kindly to competition." "I'm not competition. I'm an employee." "That's not how she sees it." He wrapped her items in brown paper. "Between you and me, Miss Mercer, Cole Ryder's a good man. Wouldn't work for him if he wasn't. And you seem like good people too. Don't let Vivian Blackwell make you doubt yourself." The unexpected kindness nearly undid her. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton." When she emerged from the store, arms full of packages, Cole was waiting by the wagon. He took one look at her face and frowned. "What happened?" "Nothing. Just ran into one of Iron Hollow's leading citizens." Evelyn handed him the packages, avoiding his eyes. "Let me guess. Vivian Blackwell?" She looked up sharply. "How did you know?" "Because she makes it her business to terrorize any woman she sees as a threat." Cole loaded the packages into the wagon bed. "What did she say?" "It doesn't matter. It matters if it upset you." Evelyn was surprised by the anger in his voice, not directed at her, but on her behalf. "She implied I was throwing myself at you, that I was using the housekeeper position as an excuse to, well, you can imagine." Cole's jaw tightened. "That woman has more poison than a rattlesnake. I'm sorry, Miss Mercer. I should have warned you." "Warned me about what? That I'd be judged for earning honest wages?" "I already knew that, Mr. Ryder." Evelyn climbed into the wagon, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. "I just didn't expect it to sting quite so much." They rode in silence for a few minutes. Then Cole said, "Vivian's been chasing me for 3 years. I've made it clear I'm not interested, but she doesn't hear no. Her father keeps trying to buy Silver Ridge to expand his mining operations, and I keep refusing. They're both used to getting what they want. What does that have to do with me? You're living in the house she thought she'd end up in, working the land she expected to control. Vivian doesn't actually want me. She wants to win. And right now, you're in her way. Evelyn absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. So I've made an enemy without even trying. Welcome to frontier politics. But there was sympathy in Cole's voice. For what it's worth, you handled her better than most. Vivian usually reduces women to tears within 5 minutes. I've already cried over one person who didn't deserve it. I won't waste tears on another. Cole glanced at her, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or respect. You're stronger than you think, Miss Mercer. I'm learning to be. The rest of the ride passed in silence, but it was comfortable now. By the time they reached Silver Ridge, the sun was setting, painting the valley in shades of gold and red. Evelyn climbed down from the wagon and looked at the ranch house. It wasn't grand or elegant, but it was clean, well-maintained, and, at least for now, it was hers to care for. Thank you for taking me to town, she said to Cole. Despite the difficulties, I'm glad I went. Why's that? Because now I know what I'm dealing with. Evelyn picked up her packages. And I'm not afraid of it. She walked into the house, leaving Cole standing by the wagon, and set about preparing dinner. As she worked, she thought about Vivian Blackwell's words. Desperate. Eastern. Woman. The help. All technically true, but also incomplete. Yes, she was desperate, but desperation had made her brave. Yes, she was an Eastern woman, but she was learning the West. Yes, she was the help. But there was dignity in work honestly done. And if Vivian Blackwell couldn't see that, then that was her failure, not Evelyn's. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Evelyn managed the household with growing confidence. She learned which chores needed doing daily and which could wait. She figured out how to make their limited supplies stretch without sacrificing quality. She even started experimenting with recipes, adapting her mother's teachings to frontier ingredients. And slowly, without quite meaning to, she began to care about Silver Ridge itself. She noticed when the fence by the creek needed repair and mentioned it to Cole. She realized the chickens were producing less because their coop was too hot and suggested relocating it to a shadier spot. She saw that Mason's shirts were wearing through at the shoulders and started reinforcing them before they tore completely. These were small things, but they mattered. One evening, about 5 weeks after her arrival, Cole found her on the porch after dinner. She was watching the sunset, enjoying the brief coolness that came with dusk. Mind if I join you? He asked. It's your porch. He settled into the chair beside her, stretching out his long legs with a tired sigh. For a few minutes, they sat in silence, watching the sky change colors. I wanted to thank you, Cole said finally. For what? For everything. The house, the meals, the work. But more than that, he paused, searching for words. You've made Silver Ridge feel like a home again. I didn't realize how much I missed that until you got here. Evelyn felt warmth spread through her chest. I'm just doing my job. No, you're doing more than that. He turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious. You care. That's different from just working. And it matters. She didn't know what to say to that. So she just nodded, and they sat together as the stars began appearing in the darkening sky. It was a peaceful moment, the kind of moment Evelyn would have dismissed as boring back in Philadelphia. But now it felt precious. Real. The trouble started the next week. Evelyn had gone down to the creek to wash clothes, enjoying the relative coolness near the water. She was wringing out one of Mason's shirts when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. She looked up to see a man riding toward the ranch house. Not Cole or Mason, someone else. He was riding erratically, and even from a distance she could tell something was wrong. Her first instinct was to run back to the house, to follow Cole's instructions about not engaging with strangers. But something stopped her. The man was hunched over his saddle, swaying, and as he got closer she saw blood on his shirt. He was injured. Evelyn dropped the laundry and ran toward the house, reaching the porch just as the rider pulled up. Up close she recognized him, one of the ranch hands from a neighboring spread, a kid named Tommy who couldn't be more than 17. Help! He gasped, then tumbled from his saddle. Evelyn caught him, or tried to. He was heavier than she expected, and they both went down in a heap. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and blood was seeping through his shirt at an alarming rate. "What happened?" Evelyn demanded, trying to remember everything Cole had taught her about injuries. Stampede, got caught, fence wire. Tommy's eyes were unfocused. Need help. All right, just hold on. Evelyn got an arm under him and somehow half dragged, half carried him into the house. She got him onto the table, the only surface large enough, and started cutting away his shirt. The wound was bad. A long gash across his ribs, deep and ragged, like he'd been dragged through barbed wire. It was still bleeding, though not as badly as it could have been. Evelyn's hands shook as she grabbed the medical supplies Cole had shown her. Clean cloth, whiskey for sterilizing, needle and thread for stitching. She'd never done this before, never even seen it done. But Tommy was losing blood, and there was no one else. So she did it anyway. She cleaned the wound, wincing at Tommy's screams of pain. She poured whiskey over everything, wasting the expensive liquid but not caring. And then, with shaking hands and a prayer she didn't quite believe in, she began stitching him back together. It was messy. Her stitches were uneven and probably not deep enough. But slowly, the bleeding stopped. The wound closed. Tommy passed out somewhere in the middle of it, which was probably a mercy. By the time she finished, Evelyn was covered in blood and shaking violently. She bandaged the wound as best she could, then staggered outside and vomited into the bushes. That's where Cole found her an hour later, sitting on the porch steps, still covered in blood, staring at nothing. What happened? He was off his horse before it stopped moving, fear stark in his face. "Evelyn, are you hurt?" It was the first time he'd used her first name. She barely noticed. "Tommy from the Wilson Ranch. Stampede injury. He's inside. I stitched him up, but I don't know if I did it right. There was so much blood, and I—" Cole was already moving past her into the house. She heard him speaking to Tommy, who must have woken up. Then he was back outside, kneeling in front of her. "You did good," he said firmly. "The stitches are holding. He's stable. You saved his life." "I was so scared." Evelyn's voice cracked. "I didn't know what to do. But you did it anyway. That's courage, Evelyn." His hands were gentle on her shoulders. "You could have panicked, could have turned him away like I told you to. Instead, you helped him. That takes guts." Something broke inside her, and suddenly she was crying, great heaving sobs that she couldn't control. All the fear and stress and adrenaline came pouring out, and Cole just held her, letting her fall apart on the dusty porch of a ranch that wasn't even hers. When the storm passed, she pulled back, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. That was unprofessional. Evelyn, you just performed emergency surgery on your kitchen table. I think you're allowed to be a little emotional." He stood, offering her his hand. "Come on, let's get you cleaned up. Then we'll figure out what to do about Tommy." That night, after Tommy had been picked up by his grateful employers, and Evelyn had finally scrubbed the blood from her hands, she sat at the table with Cole and Mason, drinking whiskey that burned all the way down. "You were incredible today," Mason said, looking at her with something like awe. "I've seen grown men faint at the sight of that much blood." "I almost did." Evelyn took another sip of whiskey. "But there was no one else, so I just kept going." "That's what surviving out here is," Cole said quietly. "Doing what needs to be done, even when you're terrified. Especially when you're terrified." Evelyn looked at him across the table. "Is that how you got your scar?" She regretted the question immediately. Too personal, too intrusive. But Cole just touched the mark on his face absently. "Knife fight 5 years ago. Man tried to steal my horse. I stopped him. He didn't like that." His voice was matter-of-fact, but there was weight behind the words. "Could have killed me. Probably should have. But I got lucky." "And you just kept going?" "Had to. Ranch doesn't run itself." He met her eyes. "Same reason you stitched Tommy up today. Because someone had to, and you were the one there." Evelyn thought about that later, lying in her narrow bed, listening to the night sounds that had become familiar. She'd come west expecting adventure, romance, a grand story to tell. Instead, she'd found something else, something harder and more real. She'd found that she was capable of things she'd never imagined, that fear didn't have to stop her, that strength wasn't about never being scared. It was about doing what needed to be done anyway. Thomas Brennan had abandoned her. Vivian Blackwell had mocked her. Iron Hollow had judged her. But she was still here, still working, still fighting, and somehow that felt like victory. The next morning, Evelyn woke before dawn as usual, but her body ached in new ways. Her hands were stiff from gripping the needle for so long. Her back hurt from hunching over Tommy's wound. But she got up anyway, made coffee, started breakfast. When Cole came in, he looked at her carefully. "You doing all right?" "I'm sore, but I'm fine." She cracked eggs into the pan. "How's Tommy?" "Sent word this morning. He's going to make it thanks to you." Cole poured himself coffee. "His boss wants to thank you personally. Said to tell you you're welcome at the Wilson Ranch any time." "I was just doing what anyone would do." "No, Evelyn, you were doing what very few people could do." He sat at the table, cradling his coffee. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." She turned to look at him, suddenly nervous. "All right. Are you happy here?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "At Silver Ridge, are you happy? Because I know it's not what you expected when you came west. It's hard work, it's isolated, and after yesterday, I'm happy." The words came out before she could think them through. But once she said them, Evelyn realized they were true. "I didn't expect to be, but I am." Something shifted in Cole's expression, like he'd been hoping for that answer but hadn't quite believed he'd get it. "Good," he said simply. "That's good." They looked at each other across the kitchen, and Evelyn felt something pass between them. Not attraction exactly, or at least not just attraction. It was recognition, understanding, the acknowledgement that they were both people who'd been knocked down and gotten back up. Mason burst through the door, breaking the moment. "Sorry I'm late. One of the horses got out and—" He stopped, looking between them. "Did I interrupt something?" "No," Evelyn and Cole said simultaneously. Mason grinned. "Sure, whatever you say." He grabbed a plate. "Hey, Miss Mercer, is it true you sewed Tommy back together with your eyes closed while singing opera?" "What?" "No, who told you that?" "Tommy. Kids telling everyone in 3 counties that you're some kind of miracle worker." Evelyn felt her face heat. "I just did what I had to do. It wasn't that impressive." "Tell that to Tommy's mother. She sent this over." Mason pulled a small cloth bundle from his pocket. "Fresh bread and a note saying you're always welcome at their place." Evelyn took the bundle, touched by the gesture. She'd spent so long being judged and whispered about that actual gratitude felt foreign. "That's kind of her," she managed. The weeks that followed brought more changes. Word spread about what Evelyn had done, and the way people treated her shifted slightly. She was no longer just the abandoned bride playing house at Silver Ridge. She was the woman who'd saved Tommy Wilson's life, the Eastern girl who'd proven herself when it counted. It wasn't complete acceptance. Small towns moved slowly, and there were still plenty of people who disapproved of her living arrangement, but it was something, a crack in the wall of judgment. And as summer deepened and the work continued, Evelyn found herself thinking less about Philadelphia and her plans to leave. The deadline she'd set herself, 3 months, earn enough money, go somewhere else, was approaching fast. But now she wasn't sure she wanted to go. Silver Ridge had gotten under her skin. The work, the land, the simple rhythm of days marked by honest labor. Even Cole and Mason had become important to her in ways she hadn't expected. She was building something here. Maybe not what she'd planned, but something real. The question was, did she have the courage to stay? The answer came to Evelyn on a Tuesday morning in late August, while she was kneading bread dough at the kitchen table. Cole walked in from outside, dusty and tired, and poured himself water from the pitcher. He drank it standing at the counter, his back to her, and something about the set of his shoulders made her pause mid-knead. "What's wrong?" she asked. He turned, surprised. "How did you know something was wrong?" "You're holding yourself differently, like you're bracing for a hit." Evelyn wiped flour from her hands. "What happened?" Cole set down the cup, his jaw tight. "Ran into Silas Blackwell's foreman in town yesterday. He made another offer on Silver Ridge. Higher this time." "And you said no." "Of course I said no. This ranch isn't for sale." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "But Blackwell's not the type to accept that. He wants the water rights, the valley grazing land. Says it's wasted on cattle when silver could be mined from the hills." Evelyn felt cold dread settle in her stomach. She'd heard enough about Silas Blackwell over the past months, Vivian's father, the banker who controlled half of Iron Hollow's economy. A man who was used to getting what he wanted through money, pressure, or both. Can he force you to sell? Not legally, but there are other ways to make life difficult. Cole's expression was grim. I'm not worried about myself. I've dealt with men like Blackwell before. But Mason, you, the ranch hands, you're all caught in the middle of this. We can handle it. Can you? He looked at her directly, and she saw genuine concern in those gray eyes. Because it might get ugly, Evelyn. Blackwell doesn't play fair, and I won't blame you if you decide this isn't worth the risk. Evelyn thought about that. About the safe choice. Leaving, going somewhere quieter, avoiding trouble. 3 months ago, that's exactly what she would have done. Run away before things got complicated. But she wasn't that person anymore. I'm staying, she said firmly. This is my home too now, and I don't abandon homes just because things get difficult. Something powerful passed across Cole's face. Relief, gratitude, something warmer she didn't quite have a name for. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen me fight. She went back to kneading, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest. Now get cleaned up. Breakfast will be ready in 20 minutes, and I won't have you eating my biscuits while covered in trail dust. He laughed, the tension breaking slightly. Yes, ma'am. But the worry didn't leave his eyes. Over the next few weeks, small things started going wrong at Silver Ridge. Fences that had been fine suddenly had cut wires. A water trough was mysteriously contaminated, sickening several cattle. Tools went missing from the barn. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to be suspicious. Cole didn't say much about it, but Evelyn could see the strain building. He stayed up later, rose earlier, rode the property lines, constantly checking for damage. Mason started carrying a rifle everywhere, even just to move cattle between pastures. The atmosphere at the ranch grew tense, like waiting for a storm that kept threatening but never quite breaking. Evelyn tried to maintain normalcy. She cooked, cleaned, kept the household running smoothly, but she also started paying more attention to her surroundings. She learned to recognize the sounds of the ranch, which noises were normal and which weren't. She kept the rifle closer at hand. She watched the horizon for riders who didn't belong. She was preparing for something, though she couldn't have said exactly what. One afternoon in early September, while hanging laundry behind the house, Evelyn heard raised voices from the front. She dropped the sheet she was holding and hurried around the corner. A man stood on the porch facing Cole. Older, weathered, and clearly drunk. Even from a distance, Evelyn could smell the whiskey on him. "You owe me!" the man was shouting, swaying slightly. "I worked this ranch for 2 years, and you threw me out like garbage. I fired you for stealing, Cal." Cole's voice was level but firm. "Caught you red-handed selling my cattle to that outfit in Mineral Springs. You're lucky I didn't have you arrested. Lies, all lies." Cal Pike, Evelyn recognized him now, remembered Mason mentioning him once, lurched forward. "You just wanted to replace me with that kid. Wanted someone you could control. I wanted someone honest. Now get off my property before I make you leave." "You threatening me?" Cal's hand dropped to the gun at his hip. "You think you're so high and mighty, Cole Ryder, but you're just another rancher playing at being respectable. I know what you did in Texas. I know why you really came out here." Evelyn saw Cole's expression change, something dangerous flickering across his face. "Whatever you think you know, Cal, you're wrong. Now leave." "Make me." Time seemed to slow. Cal's hand moved toward his gun. Cole's hand moved too, faster. And Evelyn, without thinking, grabbed the heavy iron skillet she'd left on the porch railing and swung it as hard as she could. The skillet connected with Cal's wrist just as he cleared his holster. The gun went flying, and Cal howled in pain and surprise. "What the—" "Get off this property," Evelyn said, her voice shaking but firm, the skillet still raised. "Now." Cal stared at her, cradling his wrist. Then his face twisted with ugly rage. "You stupid woman, you have no idea what you've just done." "I know exactly what I did. I protected my home." Evelyn took a step forward, and to her surprise, Cal backed up. "You have 10 seconds to get on your horse and ride away. After that, I start swinging again." For a moment, she thought he might actually try to fight, but then Cole moved to stand beside her, and Mason appeared from the barn with a rifle, and Cal seemed to realize he was outnumbered. "This isn't over," he spat. "Blackwell's going to crush you, all of you, and I'm going to enjoy watching." He stumbled to his horse, mounted clumsily, and rode off in a cloud of dust and curses. Evelyn lowered the skillet, suddenly aware of how hard her heart was pounding. "Nice swing," Mason said, grinning despite the tension. "Are you all right?" Cole asked, touching her arm gently. "I'm fine. Just, that was Cal Pike? The one you fired months ago?" "Yeah." Cole's expression was dark. "And he just confirmed what I suspected. Blackwell's behind the sabotage. He's been paying Cal to cause trouble, hoping I'd get frustrated enough to sell." "What did Cal mean about Texas?" Evelyn asked before she could stop herself. "What you did there?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's a conversation for another time. Right now, we need to prepare. Because Cal's right about one thing. This isn't over." That night, after a tense dinner where no one ate much, Cole called them all together in the main room, Evelyn, Mason, and the 2 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse. "I'm not going to lie to you," Cole said, standing by the fireplace. "Blackwell wants this ranch, and he's willing to fight dirty to get it. What happened today with Cal was just the beginning. It's going to get worse before it gets better." "So what do we do?" one of the hands asked. "We defend what's ours. We work in pairs from now on. No one goes anywhere alone. We keep weapons close. We watch for trouble." Cole's gaze moved to each of them. "But I want to be clear. If any of you want to leave, I won't hold it against you. This isn't your fight." "Like hell it isn't," Mason said immediately. "This ranch is as much my home as anyone's. I'm staying." The 2 ranch hands nodded agreement. Then all eyes turned to Evelyn. She thought about Philadelphia, about the safe, predictable life she could have had if she'd never answered Thomas Brennan's advertisement, about how much easier it would be to simply walk away from this mess. But she also thought about the past 3 months, about learning to be strong, about finding a place where she mattered, where her work had meaning, about Cole looking at her like she was capable of anything, about Mason's easy friendship, about this rough, harsh, beautiful land that had somehow become home. "I'm staying too," she said quietly. "You're not getting rid of me that easily." Cole's expression softened. "Then we fight together." The next few days were strangely peaceful, like the eye of a hurricane. They all went about their work with increased vigilance, but nothing happened. No more sabotage, no more threats. Just normal ranch life under abnormal tension. Evelyn found herself watching Cole more closely. She noticed things she'd been too busy to see before, the way he was always the first one up and the last one to bed. How he never asked anyone to do work he wasn't willing to do himself. The quiet kindness he showed to animals and people alike. And she noticed how he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't paying attention. Like he was seeing her, really seeing her, in a way no one ever had before. It terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. One evening, about a week after Cal's visit, Cole found Evelyn on the porch watching the sunset. It had become her habit, this quiet time between the work of the day and the darkness of night. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, just like he had weeks ago. "It's your porch," she said, echoing her previous response. He settled into the chair beside her, and for a while they just sat in comfortable silence. Then he said, "You asked about Texas." Evelyn turned to look at him, surprised. "You don't have to tell me." "I know, but I want to." He stared out at the valley, his profile sharp against the fading light. "I wasn't always a rancher. 5 years ago, I worked for a big cattle outfit down in Texas. We were driving a herd north, and we got ambushed by rustlers." He touched the scar on his face absently. "Fight got ugly. Men died. I killed one of the rustlers, had to. It was him, or me. But his brother swore revenge, said he'd hunt me down and make me pay. Is that why you came here? Partly. But also because I was tired of running cattle for other people. Wanted to build something of my own, something that mattered." He looked at her then. "Cal found out about the killing somehow. He's been spreading rumors that I'm a murderer, that I'm dangerous, trying to hurt my reputation. Are you dangerous? When I need to be." His voice was steady, unflinching. "I won't lie to you, Evelyn. I've done things I'm not proud of, but I've never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it, and I've never taken what wasn't mine. That's the best I can offer." Evelyn studied his face, the scar, the gray eyes that had seen too much, the hard line of his jaw. She should have been afraid. Any sensible woman would be. But she wasn't afraid. She was something else entirely. "I don't think you're dangerous," she said softly. "I think you're a good man in a hard world, doing the best you can, and that's enough for me." Something shifted in Cole's expression. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His hand lingered against her cheek, warm and rough. "Evelyn," he said, his voice rough, "I need you to understand something. When this trouble with Blackwell is over, if we survive it, I'm not going to be able to let you leave. I know that's not fair. I know you're planning to move on, but A gunshot split the air. They were on their feet instantly, Cole's hand on his pistol. In the distance, orange flames were rising from the direction of the barn. "Fire!" Mason's voice panicked. "The barn's on fire!" Everything happened at once. Cole was running, shouting orders. Mason was ringing the emergency bell. The ranch hands were pouring out of the bunkhouse, and Evelyn, her heart hammering, ran toward the house to grab every bucket and blanket she could find. By the time she reached the barn, flames were climbing the wooden walls. Horses were screaming inside. That horrible, primal sound of animal terror. Smoke billowed thick and black. Cole was trying to get the barn doors open, but something was blocking them from inside. Mason was attacking the fire with a bucket of water that seemed pathetically inadequate. The ranch hands were trying to calm the panicked cattle in the nearby corral. Then Evelyn saw them, men on horseback at the edge of the property, silhouetted against the darkening sky. 6 of them, maybe 7, and leading them was Cal Pike. "Cole!" she screamed, pointing. He turned, saw the riders, and his expression went cold and hard. "Mason, get the rifles, now!" But the riders were already moving, not toward them, but around them, cutting off access to the well, trapping them between the fire and the gunmen. It was a coordinated attack. They'd planned this. Evelyn's mind raced. The horses were going to die if they didn't get them out. The barn would burn to the ground, and probably take the house with it. And those men weren't here to talk. She made a decision. While Cole was distracted by the riders, Evelyn ran to the side of the barn where the flames hadn't reached yet. There was a small door there, used for feeding. She'd noticed it weeks ago while exploring the property. It was locked, but not well. She grabbed a rock and smashed at the latch until it gave way. Smoke poured out, making her cough, and her eyes water. But she could hear the horses inside, could feel their fear. She wrapped a wet cloth around her face, grabbed from the water trough, and pushed inside. The heat was immediate and overwhelming. Smoke made it impossible to see more than a few feet, but she could hear the horses, could sense them through the darkness. "Easy," she called, her voice muffled by the cloth. "Easy now. I'm getting you out." She found the first stall, fumbled with the latch, got it open. The horse inside, one of Cole's favorites, a bay mare named Dancer, was wild with fear. But Evelyn grabbed her halter and pulled, using every ounce of strength she had. "Come on, move!" The horse finally bolted past her, nearly knocking her over, and disappeared into the night. One saved. Evelyn moved to the next stall, and the next. The smoke was getting thicker, the heat more intense. She could hear shouting outside. Cole's voice, angry and desperate, calling her name. But she kept going. 4 horses saved. 5, 6. She was reaching for the 7th stall when a beam above her cracked ominously. She looked up and saw fire eating through the roof supports. She had seconds. She got the last horse out just as the beam gave way. It crashed down behind her, sending up a shower of sparks. The horse panicked and dragged her forward through the smoke and heat toward the small door she'd come through. They burst out into the cool night air together. Evelyn fell to her knees, coughing violently, her lungs burning. The horse ran off into the darkness. And then Cole was there, pulling her away from the burning barn, his face a mask of fury and fear. "What the hell were you thinking?" he demanded, but his hands were gentle as they checked her for injuries. "You could have died in there. The horses," she gasped between coughs, "are alive because of you." Mason appeared, soot-covered and exhausted. "All 7. You saved them all." But there was no time to celebrate. The riders were getting closer, and Cal Pike's voice rang out over the chaos. "Give up the ranch, Ryder. Sign it over to Blackwell, or we burn the rest." Cole's hand went to his gun. Evelyn saw murder in his eyes. Controlled, purposeful murder. This wasn't just about the ranch anymore. This was about survival. "Stay behind me," he told her, his voice deadly calm. But Evelyn had come too far to hide. She grabbed the rifle Mason had dropped and stood beside Cole instead. "If you're fighting, I'm fighting," she said. Cole looked at her, really looked at her, and something passed between them. Recognition, partnership, trust. "All right then," he said, "let's end this." He stepped forward, away from the burning barn, into the open where Cal and his men could see him clearly. Evelyn and Mason flanked him, and the two ranch hands took positions on either side. 5 against 7. Not great odds, but better than surrendering. "Cal!" Cole's voice cut through the night. "This is between you and me. Let everyone else walk away." "This is between you and progress," Cal shouted back, slurring slightly. He was still drunk, which made him more dangerous, not less. "Blackwell's going to develop this valley proper. Going to bring real money here, not your penny ante cattle operation. By burning me out? By terrorizing my people? That's not progress. That's thuggery. Call it what you want. Either way, you're finished." Cal raised his gun, and time seemed to slow again. Evelyn saw the trajectory, saw where he was aiming, not at Cole, but at Mason, the kid who'd never hurt anyone. She didn't think. She just moved. She stepped in front of Mason, raised the rifle, and fired. The shot went wide. She'd never fired a gun before except in Cole's brief training session, but it was enough to make Cal flinch. His shot went wild, too, hitting the ground several feet away. And then everything exploded into chaos. The ranch hands opened fire. Mason dove for cover and started shooting from behind the water trough. Cole advanced on Cal with cold precision, each shot deliberate and controlled. Evelyn kept firing until the rifle clicked empty, then grabbed Mason's pistol and kept going. She had no idea if she was hitting anything. She just knew that she wasn't hiding anymore, wasn't running. She was defending her home. The fight couldn't have lasted more than a few minutes, but it felt like hours. Smoke, gunfire, shouting, men yelling, horses screaming, the barn collapsing in a shower of sparks. And then, suddenly, it was over. Cal Pike was on the ground, clutching his leg where Cole had shot him. 3 of his men were wounded. The rest had fled when they realized they weren't going to win easily. Sheriff Harding arrived with deputies just as the last of the flames died down. Someone must have seen the fire and ridden for help. He took one look at the scene and started making arrests. "Cal Pike," he said, hauling the wounded man to his feet. "You're under arrest for arson, assault, and about 6 other charges I'll think of on the ride back." "I want a lawyer," Cal spat. "Yeah, you're going to need one." The sheriff looked at Cole. "You all right?" "We will be." Cole was staring at the remains of the barn, his face unreadable. Months of work, gone in an hour. "Blackwell put you up to this?" the sheriff asked Cal. Cal glared but said nothing. "Figured." The sheriff sighed. "I'll need statements from all of you, but that can wait until morning. Get some rest. You've earned it." After the sheriff left with his prisoners, the 5 of them stood in the yard, exhausted and covered in soot, watching the last embers of the barn die. "Well," Mason said finally, "that could have gone worse." Despite everything, Evelyn laughed. It was a slightly hysterical sound, but it broke the tension. "The barn's gone," one of the ranch hands said quietly. "We'll rebuild." Cole's voice was firm. Stronger this time. Better. "With what money?" the other hand asked. "We'll figure it out." Cole looked at each of them. "But first we make sure Blackwell pays for this. Cal might not have talked yet, but he will. And when he does, Silas Blackwell is going to find out what happens when you come after Silver Ridge." Evelyn felt a surge of fierce pride. This rough, stubborn, impossible man wasn't giving up, and neither was she. "What do we do now?" she asked. Cole turned to her, and even in the darkness, she could see the intensity in his eyes. "Now we make sure they never try this again." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat still radiating from his clothes, smell the smoke on him. His hand came up to cup her face, and his voice when he spoke was rough with emotion. "You saved those horses. You stood and fought when you could have run. You could have died, Evelyn." "So could you." "I know. And it made me realize something." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I can't lose you. I won't. Not to Blackwell, not to the danger, not to whatever plan you had about leaving when you'd saved enough money." Evelyn's breath caught. "Cole? I'm not saying it right. I'm no good at this." He stepped even closer, his other hand finding her waist. "What I'm trying to say is, kiss her already," Mason shouted from somewhere behind them. "We all know where this is going." Cole huffed a laugh against her hair, and then he was kissing her. It wasn't gentle or practiced. It was desperate and real, tasting of smoke and fear and relief. His hands tightened on her, pulling her close, and she melted into him, into this moment, into the terrifying certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, the ranch hands were whooping and Mason was grinning like a fool. "Took you long enough," he said. "Shut up, Mason." But Cole was smiling as he said it, his arm still around Evelyn's waist. Evelyn looked around at the destroyed barn, the exhausted men, the ranch that had almost been lost. They'd survived tonight. But the real fight was just beginning. Silas Blackwell was still out there, still powerful, still determined to take what wasn't his. But as she stood there in Cole's arms, surrounded by people who'd become her family, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in months. She felt ready. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. And they'd win. They didn't sleep that night. There was too much to do, too much adrenaline still coursing through their veins. While Mason and the ranch hands secured the property and tended to the frightened animals, Cole and Evelyn sat at the kitchen table going through ranch documents by lamplight. "We need proof," Cole said, spreading ledgers across the table. "Cal's word alone won't be enough to bring down Blackwell. The man owns half the town, including most of the law." "Not Sheriff Harding," Evelyn pointed out. "He arrested Cal without hesitation." "Harding's honest, but he's one man. Blackwell has the town council, the mayor, the judge. He'll twist this somehow, make it look like Cal acted alone." Cole rubbed his face tiredly. "We need something concrete linking Blackwell to the attack." Evelyn thought about that, her mind working through the problem. "What about money? If Blackwell paid Cal, there'd be a record. Bank transfers, withdrawals, something." "Blackwell's too smart for that. He'd use cash, no paper trail." "Maybe. But someone had to handle the money. Someone who keeps records." Evelyn leaned forward. "Who manages Blackwell's accounts?" "His personal accountant, man named Elias Grant. Been with Blackwell for years." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Why? What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that accountants keep very detailed records. It's their job. And if Grant handled payments to Cal, he'd have documentation." She met Cole's gaze. "The question is whether he'd be willing to testify against his employer." "Not likely. Blackwell pays him well, and Grant's always been loyal." "Loyalty bought with money isn't the same as loyalty earned through respect," Evelyn said quietly. "Maybe it's worth trying." Cole studied her for a long moment. "You've changed," he said finally. "The woman who got off that train 3 months ago wouldn't have thought like this." "The woman who got off that train 3 months ago thought she was going to marry a stranger and live happily ever after." Evelyn managed a tired smile. "That woman was naive. I'm not her anymore." "No," Cole agreed, his voice warm. "You're better." They worked through the night, making lists, planning strategy. By the time dawn broke gray and smoky over the valley, they had a plan. It was risky and probably foolish, but it was something. Mason came in as the sun was rising, looking exhausted but determined. "Property's secure, horses are calmed down. Lost some feed in the barn fire, but we can manage." "Good." Cole stood, stretching his stiff back. "Get some rest. We're going to need everyone sharp for what comes next." "What comes next?" Mason asked. "We're going to war with Silas Blackwell," Evelyn said simply. "And we're going to win." Mason grinned despite his exhaustion. "About time." That morning, while Cole met with the ranch hands to coordinate repairs and security, Evelyn rode into Iron Hollow. Alone. Cole had argued against it, but she'd insisted. "Blackwell thinks of me as just the housekeeper," she'd said. "He won't see me as a threat. That's our advantage." The town was buzzing with news of the fire by the time she arrived. Evelyn tied her horse outside the general store and walked down the main street with her head high, ignoring the stares and whispers. She found Elias Grant exactly where she expected to, in a small office above the bank, surrounded by ledgers and papers. He was a thin, nervous man in his 50s, with wire-rimmed spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He looked up when she knocked, his expression wary. "Miss Mercer, I heard about the fire. Terrible business." "May I come in?" Grant hesitated, then nodded. Evelyn entered and closed the door behind her. I need to ask you something, Mr. Grant, and I need you to be honest with me. She sat down across from him without waiting for an invitation. Did Silas Blackwell pay Cal Pike to attack Silver Ridge? Grant's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, you do. I can see it in your face. Evelyn kept her voice gentle but firm. You're a good man, Mr. Grant, I can tell. Good men don't sleep well when they're complicit in violence. I keep Mr. Blackwell's accounts, that's all. What he does with his money, you know exactly what he does with it. You process every transaction, track every payment. She leaned forward. How much did he pay Cal? And how many times? Grant's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his spectacles. Miss Mercer, if I talk to you, I'm a dead man. Blackwell will destroy me. If you don't talk, he'll destroy more people. How long before someone dies in one of his attacks? How long before you're not just an accountant, but an accessory to murder? The words hung in the air between them. Grant stared at his desk, his face tormented. I have a wife, he said quietly. 2 daughters. I can't. Then do it for them, so they can be proud of their father, so they don't grow up knowing you stayed silent while innocent people suffered. Evelyn softened her voice. I know you're scared, but courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right anyway. Grant was silent for a long time. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a ledger. His hand shook as he turned pages. Blackwell's been paying Pike $300 a month for 6 months, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Officially listed as consulting fees. But I knew what it really was. Pike was supposed to sabotage Silver Ridge, make life difficult enough that Ryder would sell. Do you have documentation? Right here. Grant tapped the ledger. Every payment, every date, all in Blackwell's handwriting with his signature. Evelyn felt her heart race. Would you testify to this in front of the sheriff? Grant looked up at her, fear and hope warring in his expression. If I do this, I lose everything. My job, my reputation. Blackwell will see to that. If you do this, you save lives. You stop a man who thinks he's above the law. Evelyn reached across the desk, placing her hand over his. And Cole Ryder is a fair man. He'll help you find new work. You won't be alone in this. Grant closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded. All right, I'll testify. Evelyn felt relief wash over her. Thank you. Can you meet us at the sheriff's office this afternoon? Yes, but Miss Mercer? Grant looked at her seriously. Be careful. Blackwell doesn't lose gracefully. When he finds out about this, he'll be dangerous. I'm counting on it. Evelyn left the office and made her way to the sheriff's station, where she found Harding interviewing Cal Pike. The wounded man was sullen and uncooperative, refusing to answer questions about who'd hired him. Sheriff, Evelyn said, I need to speak with you privately. Harding looked surprised, but gestured her into his office. She quickly explained what she'd learned from Grant, and the sheriff's expression grew darker with every word. You're saying you have a witness who will testify that Blackwell ordered the attack? Yes. Elias Grant, Blackwell's own accountant. He'll be here this afternoon with documentation. Well, I'll be damned. Harding sat back in his chair. That changes everything. With Grant's testimony and Pike's involvement, we might actually be able to bring charges against Blackwell. Might? The man has influence, Miss Mercer. Even with evidence, he'll fight this with every resource he has. It won't be easy. I didn't expect easy, Evelyn said. I just expected justice. That afternoon, Elias Grant arrived at the sheriff's office carrying a leather satchel full of ledgers. His face was pale but determined, and his wife stood beside him, her hand clutching his arm. I want to do the right thing, Grant told Sheriff Harding, whatever the cost. The sheriff took his statement, examined the ledgers, and his expression grew grimmer with each page. Finally, he stood and reached for his hat. I'm going to arrest Silas Blackwell, he announced. Miss Mercer, Mr. Grant, I'll need you both to come with me. Your testimonies will be crucial. Now? Grant looked terrified. Now, before Blackwell hears what's happening and disappears, or worse. Harding checked his pistol. Let's go. The walk to Blackwell's bank felt like marching into battle. Evelyn's heart pounded, but she kept her spine straight and her head high. Beside her, Grant looked like he might faint at any moment. The bank was impressive, all polished wood and brass fixtures designed to intimidate.
Silas Blackwell sat in a large office at the back, a big man with silver hair and cold eyes that calculated worth in every glance. He looked up as they entered, and his expression barely flickered. "Sheriff, to what do I owe this interruption?" "Silas Blackwell," Harding said formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, assault, and destruction of property. You have the right to This is absurd." Blackwell stood, his voice sharp. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that you paid Cal Pike to attack Silver Ridge Ranch. We have documentation and witness testimony." Harding gestured to Grant and Evelyn. "Including from your own accountant." Blackwell's gaze snapped to Grant, and the accountant visibly flinched. "Elias, what have you done?" "What I should have done months ago," Grant said, his voice shaking but clear. "I'm not protecting you anymore, Silas. What you did was wrong. You're ruining yourself for nothing. That ranch isn't worth protecting." "It's not about the ranch," Evelyn spoke up. "It's about stopping a man who thinks money gives him the right to hurt people." Blackwell finally looked at her, really looked at her, and his lip curled in disdain. "The abandoned bride, playing at being important. You're nothing, girl. A discarded piece of trash living off Ryder's charity." The words were meant to wound, and months ago they would have. But Evelyn had learned something important in her time at Silver Ridge. She didn't need Silas Blackwell's approval. She didn't need anyone's approval but her own. "You're right," she said calmly. "I was abandoned. I was desperate. But I survived, and I built something real. You, on the other hand, built an empire on cruelty and intimidation. Between us, Mr. Blackwell, I know who's worth more." Fury flashed across Blackwell's face. "You'll regret this. All of you. I'll bury you in legal fees. I'll destroy your reputations. By the time you're done, you'll be in prison." Sheriff Harding stepped forward. "Now, are you coming peacefully, or do I need to drag you out?" For a moment, it looked like Blackwell might actually fight. Then his shoulders sagged slightly, and he reached for his coat. "I want my lawyer." "You'll need him." As they led Blackwell out of the bank, a crowd had gathered on the street. Word had spread fast. Small towns were good at that. Evelyn saw shock, satisfaction, and in some faces, fear. Silas Blackwell had controlled Iron Hollow for so long that seeing him in chains was almost unthinkable. But it was happening. And then Evelyn saw her, Vivian Blackwell, standing on the sidewalk, her face a mask of horror as her father was led away. Their eyes met across the crowd. For a moment, Evelyn almost felt sorry for her. Then she remembered Vivian's cruelty, her mocking words, her sense of superiority. Evelyn looked away first. Vivian wasn't worth her energy anymore. The crowd parted as they walked through, and Evelyn heard the whispers starting. By tomorrow, everyone in the territory would know that Silas Blackwell had fallen, and that an Eastern woman who'd once been the subject of gossip and pity had been part of bringing him down. At the sheriff's office, formal charges were filed. Cal Pike, faced with Blackwell's arrest and the weight of evidence, finally broke and gave a full confession. He'd been hired to sabotage Silver Ridge, with escalating violence if coal wouldn't sell. The fire had been the final attempt, burn them out completely. Blackwell said Ryder was a nobody, Cal muttered. Said he had no right to that land when it could be put to better use. Said if we made it painful enough, he'd give up. He was wrong, Evelyn said quietly. Cole Ryder doesn't give up. None of us do. By the time she left the sheriff's office, the sun was setting. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, but also strangely exhilarated. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. She found Cole waiting for her outside with the horses. He searched her face, then pulled her into a tight embrace. "You did it," he said into her hair. "Harding told me everything. You brought down Blackwell." "We brought him down. All of us." She pulled back to look at him. "Grant testified. Cal confessed. Blackwell's going to prison." "And you were brilliant." Cole cupped her face in his hands. "Brave and brilliant and slightly terrifying. Remind me never to cross you." Evelyn laughed, feeling giddy with relief and exhaustion. "Can we go home now?" "Yeah, let's go home." They rode back to Silver Ridge in the gathering darkness, not speaking much but not needing to. The valley opened before them, the ranch house visible in the distance with lamplight glowing in the windows. Mason had kept things running while they were gone. Home. The word settled into Evelyn's chest with surprising warmth. This rough, harsh place had become home in a way Philadelphia never had. Over the following days, Iron Hollow buzzed with scandal. Silas Blackwell's arrest was all anyone could talk about. Some people were shocked, others vindicated, a few quietly pleased to see the powerful man brought low. Vivian Blackwell left town 3 days later, heading east to stay with relatives. She didn't say goodbye to anyone, didn't try to defend her father. She just disappeared like morning fog, and Iron Hollow seemed to breathe easier without her. Elias Grant, true to his word, had lost his position at the bank, but Cole offered him work at Silver Ridge, keeping the ranch books and managing accounts. Grant accepted gratefully, and his wife sent Evelyn a beautiful quilt as thanks. "You saved my husband," Mrs. Grant said when she delivered it. Not just from Blackwell, but from himself. He'd been dying inside, knowing what was happening. Now he can sleep at night. Evelyn folded the quilt carefully, touched by the gesture. He saved himself. He chose courage over fear. That's all any of us can do. The trial was set for late September. In the meantime, life at Silver Ridge returned to something resembling normal. They rebuilt the barn, bigger and stronger this time, with help from neighboring ranchers who'd heard what happened. The community rallied around them in ways Evelyn hadn't expected. Apparently, standing up to Silas Blackwell had earned them respect across the territory. People who'd barely nodded to Evelyn before now greeted her warmly in town. She was no longer the abandoned bride or the improper housekeeper. She was the woman who'd helped bring down a tyrant. It felt strange and wonderful and slightly overwhelming. One evening, about 2 weeks after Blackwell's arrest, Cole found Evelyn in the kitchen after dinner. She was kneading bread dough, her hands working in the familiar rhythm that had become meditative. "Can we talk?" he asked. Something in his tone made her stomach flutter. "Of course." He leaned against the counter, watching her work. "The trial's coming up. After that, Blackwell will likely go to prison for a long time. Silver Ridge will be safe." "That's good news." "It is. But it also means—" He paused, struggling with the words. "It means you'll be free to leave, to go wherever you want. You've more than earned your wages, and I'll give you extra for everything you've done." Evelyn's hands stilled in the dough. "Is that what you want, for me to leave?" "Hell no." The words came out rough, almost angry. "But I won't trap you here, Evelyn. You came west for a fresh start, not to get caught up in ranch wars and attacks. If you want to go to San Francisco, or back east, or anywhere else, I'll help you get there." "And if I want to stay?" Cole's eyes snapped to hers. "Do you?" Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron, taking her time, gathering her thoughts. "I came here expecting one life and found a completely different one. I thought I wanted adventure and romance. What I found was work and purpose and—" She looked at him directly. "And a man who makes me want to be braver than I ever thought I could be." "Evelyn, I'm not finished." She took a breath. "I'm not the same person who answered Thomas Brennan's advertisement. That woman was running away from something, but I'm not running anymore. I'm choosing, and I choose this ranch, this life." She paused. "I choose you." Cole closed the distance between them in 2 strides. "You're sure?" "Because once you say yes, I'm not letting go. I'll want everything. Marriage, partnership, building this ranch together, all of it." "I'm sure." Evelyn reached up to touch his face, tracing the scar she'd come to know so well. "I've never been more sure of anything." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, flour-dusted hands and all. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because you need rescuing or because you have nowhere else to go. Marry me because we're better together than apart." "Yes." The word came easily, without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." Mason chose that moment to walk into the kitchen, took one look at them, and grinned. "Finally! Do you know how painful it's been watching you two dance around each other for months?" "Get out, Mason," Cole said without heat. "Just came to tell you dinner's getting cold. But hey, congratulations." He grabbed a roll from the cooling rack. "Does this mean Miss Mercer's going to be Mrs. Ryder now?" "If she wants to be," Cole said, looking at Evelyn. She thought about it. Evelyn Ryder. It sounded right. Strong and simple and honest. Everything this new life had become. "I do," she said. "I really do." The trial began on the last Monday of September. The courthouse in Iron Hollow was packed with spectators. Everyone wanted to see Silas Blackwell face justice. Evelyn sat in the front row with Cole, Mason, and Elias Grant, trying to ignore the stares and whispers. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. The ledgers showing payments to Cal Pike, Pike's confession about the sabotage campaign, Grant's testimony about Blackwell's intentions, the physical evidence from the barn fire. It was damning. Blackwell's lawyer tried to argue that it was all circumstantial, that Cal had acted alone, that the payments were legitimate consulting fees. But the evidence was too strong, too detailed. When it was Evelyn's turn to testify, she walked to the stand with her head high. She told the court about the night of the fire, about the riders who'd attacked them, about Cal's admission that Blackwell had sent him. "And why do you think Mr. Blackwell targeted Silver Ridge?" the prosecutor asked. "Because Cole Ryder wouldn't sell," Evelyn said clearly. "Because Mr. Blackwell is used to getting what he wants through money and pressure. When that didn't work, he turned to violence." "That's slander," Blackwell's lawyer objected. "It's the truth," Evelyn said, looking directly at Blackwell. "And the truth doesn't care about your money or your influence." The judge banged his gavel. "Order. Miss Mercer, please stick to the facts." "Those are the facts, Your Honor." The trial lasted 3 days. On the afternoon of the third day, the jury returned with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Some people cheered. Others sat in stunned silence. Blackwell himself showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the table in front of him so hard his knuckles went white. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in territorial prison. 15 years for a man who thought himself untouchable. As they led Blackwell away, he looked at Cole one last time. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes," Cole replied, "it is." Outside the courthouse, people crowded around them, thanking them, congratulating them, offering support. It was overwhelming and wonderful and slightly surreal. "Drinks at the saloon," someone shouted. "On the house." To celebrate justice. Evelyn found herself swept along in the crowd, Cole's hand firm in hers, anchoring her. They ended up at the saloon, where the proprietor, a burly man named Jack, who'd always been fair to them, poured generous shots of whiskey. "To Silver Ridge," someone toasted. "To justice. To the woman brave enough to stand up to Blackwell." Evelyn felt her face heat as people raised glasses in her direction. She'd never wanted attention, had never imagined herself as any kind of hero. But looking around at these rough, honest people who'd welcomed her despite everything, she felt grateful. This was community. This was belonging. This was home. Later that night, after the celebrations had wound down and they'd ridden back to Silver Ridge, Evelyn stood on the porch watching the stars. The valley was quiet and peaceful, the only sounds the gentle wind and distant cattle. Cole came out to join her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You all right?" "Better than all right." She accepted the coffee gratefully. "I was just thinking about the day I arrived here. How terrified I was. How lost." "You weren't lost. You just hadn't found your way yet." "Maybe." Evelyn sipped her coffee. "Or maybe I had to get lost before I could find the right path." Cole put his arm around her and she leaned into his warmth. Above them, the sky was infinite and full of stars. More stars than she'd ever seen in Philadelphia, more than she'd imagined existed. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now we rebuild. The barn's almost finished. We'll need to restock supplies before winter. Plan the spring planting." He paused. "And somewhere in there, we'll get married, if you still want to." "I still want to." She turned to look at him. "When?" "Whenever you're ready. Tomorrow, next month, next year. I'm not going anywhere." Evelyn thought about that. "How about October? After the harvest, before the first snow. Something simple, just family and friends." "Family and friends," Cole repeated, and she heard the emotion in his voice. He'd been alone for so long, building this ranch with just Mason and a few hired hands. The idea of family must feel foreign and precious. "We're your family now," Evelyn said softly. "Me, Mason, everyone who stood with us. We're building something together, something that lasts." Cole pulled her closer, his face buried in her hair. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know I should have said it before, should have." "I love you too." The words felt right, natural. "And you don't have to explain, I know." They stood there on the porch as the night deepened, 2 people who'd both been lost and had somehow found each other in the vastness of the frontier. Outside, the land stretched endlessly in all directions, harsh and beautiful and full of possibility. Tomorrow would bring work and challenges and 1,000 small decisions. But tonight, there was just this. Peace and coffee and stars and the certainty that they'd fought for something worth fighting for. And won. The first frost came early that year, appearing overnight like a whispered promise of winter. Evelyn woke to find the grass outside her window glittering silver in the dawn light, each blade transformed into something crystalline and temporary. She dressed quickly in the pre-dawn darkness, her breath misting in the cold air. The house was quiet, Cole and Mason still asleep, the ranch hands not yet stirring in the bunkhouse. These early morning moments had become precious to her, a space of stillness before the day's demands began. In the kitchen, she started coffee and began preparing breakfast. Her hands moved through familiar motions, cracking eggs, slicing bread, stoking the fire. Simple work, but it anchored her. Reminded her how far she'd traveled from the frightened woman who'd stepped off that train 5 months ago. 5 months. It felt like a lifetime. "You're up early." She turned to find Cole in the doorway, his hair rumpled from sleep, shirt half-buttoned. Something warm bloomed in her chest at the domestic intimacy of it. This man who'd become her partner in every way that mattered. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Too much to think about." "Wedding nerves?" He came to stand beside her, stealing a piece of bacon from the cooling rack. "Maybe, or maybe I'm just realizing how strange life is." She cracked another egg into the pan. 6 months ago, I thought I knew exactly what my future looked like. Marriage to Thomas Brennan, a small house in town, maybe children eventually. Very predictable. And now? Now I'm marrying a rancher I barely knew 3 months ago, living 8 miles from civilization. And apparently I know how to stitch up injuries and fire a rifle. She laughed softly. My mother would be horrified. Would she? Cole's voice was thoughtful. Or would she be proud that her daughter survived when life didn't go according to plan? Evelyn considered that. Her mother had been proper and conventional, yes, but she'd also been strong in her own way, raising Evelyn alone after her father retreated into his study and his disappointments, teaching her daughter to manage a household, to think clearly, to stand straight even when the world pushed back. Maybe she would be proud, Evelyn said quietly. I'd like to think so anyway. They ate breakfast together as the sun rose, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. Mason joined them halfway through, yawning and complaining about the cold. The ranch hands came in after, stamping their feet and warming their hands by the stove. It was ordinary, gloriously, wonderfully ordinary, and Evelyn had learned to treasure the ordinary moments between the dramatic ones. Big day today, Mason said, grinning at her over his coffee. You ready? As ready as I'll ever be. The wedding was set for that afternoon, a simple ceremony in the main room of the ranch house. Sheriff Harding had agreed to officiate, and they'd invited the neighboring ranchers, Elias Grant and his family, Mrs. Chen from the boarding house, and a handful of people from town who'd supported them during the trial. Nothing fancy, no elaborate dress or formal reception, just honest people gathering to witness two people making promises to each other. That morning, while the men worked outside preparing the space, Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Grant arrived early to help Evelyn get ready. They brought food for the small gathering, helped rearrange furniture, and fussed over Evelyn in a way that was both annoying and touching. You need flowers, Mrs. Chen declared, surveying Evelyn critically. Can't get married without flowers. There aren't any flowers this time of year, Evelyn pointed out. Then we make do. Mrs. Chen disappeared outside and returned with branches of dried sage and late-blooming wildflowers she'd somehow found near the creek. She wove them into a simple crown that smelled of autumn and prairie wind. Mrs. Grant presented Evelyn with a dress, not wedding white, but a deep blue wool that brought out her eyes. I altered one of mine, she explained. Figured you'd want something practical you could wear again. Evelyn touched the fabric, emotion thick in her throat. Thank you. Both of you. I don't know what I did to deserve such kindness. You stood up when others would have stayed down, Mrs. Chen said matter-of-factly. You earned respect. Now stop crying, or your face will be all blotchy for the ceremony. By noon, guests began arriving. The Wilson family came, including young Tommy, who was fully recovered and insisted on shaking Evelyn's hand vigorously. Other ranchers arrived with their families, bringing food and congratulations, Even Mr. Thornton from the general store showed up, looking slightly embarrassed but pleased to be included. The house filled with voices and laughter and the smell of good food. It felt alive in a way it never had before. Not just a structure, but a home full of people who cared about each other. Evelyn stood in her small room, listening to the sounds outside, and felt something shift inside her. This was what she'd been searching for all along, though she hadn't known it. Not grand adventure or romantic rescue, just belonging, just community, just the simple, complicated business of building a life with other people. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Evelyn, it's time." She took a deep breath, smoothed her blue dress, and opened the door. Mason stood there, looking uncomfortable in his cleanest shirt, his hair actually combed for once. "You look beautiful," he said awkwardly. "Really, Cole's a lucky man." "I'm a lucky woman." She took his offered arm. "Thank you for standing with us, Mason, for everything." "Are you kidding? You two saved my life before I even knew I needed saving." He paused at the threshold of the main room. "Ready?" Evelyn looked through the doorway at the gathered people, at Cole standing near the fireplace in his best clothes, looking nervous and hopeful, at the life waiting for her on the other side of this moment. "Ready," she said. They walked into the room together, and every face turned toward her. But Evelyn only saw Cole. The way his expression softened when their eyes met, the slight tremor in his hands that told her he was as affected by this as she was. Sheriff Harding stood between them, a worn book in his hands. "Friends and neighbors," he began, his voice carrying easily through the room, "we're gathered here to witness the marriage of Cole Ryder and Evelyn Mercer. Now, I'm not much for fancy speeches, so I'll keep this simple. Marriage in the West isn't just about two people. It's about partnership, about building something together that's stronger than what either person could build alone." He looked at Cole. "Cole, you've built a good ranch here through hard work and integrity. You willing to share that with Evelyn? To make her your equal partner in all things?" "I am." Cole's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving Evelyn's face. "Evelyn, you came west looking for one life and found another. You proved yourself through courage and determination. You willing to build your future here with Cole? To face whatever comes as partners?" Evelyn thought about all the reasons she could say no. The hardship, the isolation, the uncertainty of frontier life. Then she thought about morning coffee with Cole, about Mason's terrible jokes, about the satisfaction of work well done, about belonging to a place and people instead of drifting through life trying to meet someone else's expectations. "I am," she said clearly. "Then by the authority vested in me as sheriff of Iron Hollow, and in the presence of these witnesses, I declare you married. Cole, you can kiss your wife now before I change my mind." Laughter rippled through the room as Cole pulled Evelyn close and kissed her. It wasn't their first kiss, not even close, but it felt different, official. A promise made in front of people who mattered, people who'd hold them accountable to being better versions of themselves. When they pulled apart, the room erupted in cheers and applause. Mason was grinning like a fool. Mrs. Chen was wiping her eyes with her apron. Even Sheriff Harding looked pleased with himself. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Ryder," Cole said softly, just for her. Mrs. Ryder. The name settled over her like a comfortable coat, worn and familiar even though she'd only just put it on. "Thank you for giving me one," she replied. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of celebration. There was food, more than they could possibly eat, and someone had brought a fiddle and played dancing music. The furniture got pushed back, and people danced in the main room, boots stomping on the wooden floors. Evelyn danced with Cole, with Mason, with Sheriff Harding, with Tommy Wilson, who blushed furiously the entire time. She ate too much, laughed until her sides hurt, and felt more purely happy than she could ever remember being. As the sun began setting and guests started departing, promising to return for the upcoming harvest celebration, Evelyn found herself on the porch, catching her breath. The valley spread before her in the golden autumn light, beautiful and harsh, and exactly right. "You look thoughtful." She turned to find Elias Grant beside her, his usual nervous energy quieted by the peaceful afternoon. "Just thinking about how strange life is," she said, "how the worst thing that ever happened to me led to the best thing." Grant nodded slowly. "I've been thinking similar thoughts. Losing my position at the bank felt like the end of the world. But working here, keeping honest books for honest people, I sleep better now than I have in years." No regrets? About testifying against Blackwell? Not one. He straightened slightly. I spent years being afraid. Afraid of losing my job, my reputation, my security. But fear is expensive. It costs you your integrity, your peace of mind, eventually your soul. What you taught me, Mrs. Ryder, is that courage is actually cheaper. It might hurt in the moment, but you get to keep yourself. Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. That's the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me. It's the truth. You showed all of us what bravery looks like. He smiled. Now I should get back to my wife before she thinks I've run off. Congratulations again. After he left, Evelyn stood alone on the porch, thinking about his words. Fear is expensive. She'd never thought of it that way, but he was right. Fear of disappointing her father had kept her trapped in Philadelphia. Fear of judgment had almost made her hide at the boarding house. Fear of vulnerability had nearly stopped her from opening her heart to Cole. But every time she'd chosen courage over fear, even when her hands shook and her voice trembled, she'd gained something real, something that lasted. The door opened behind her, and Cole emerged carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. Thought you might want this. It's been a long day. A good day. She accepted the glass gratefully. The best day. They stood together watching the last light fade from the sky, sipping whiskey and not needing to fill the silence with words. This was what partnership felt like, Evelyn realized. Not constant conversation or grand gestures, but comfortable presence. Knowing someone had your back, choosing each other over and over again. Cole? She said after a while. What you said that night, about not being able to let me leave. Did you mean it? He turned to look at her, his expression serious in the gathering darkness. Every word. But Evelyn, you have to know, I'd never actually keep you here against your will. If you wanted to leave tomorrow, I'd help you pack. I'd hate it, but I'd do it. I know. That's why I'm staying. She took his hand. You're not trapping me. I'm choosing this, choosing you, choosing the life we're building together. Even though it's hard, even though winters are brutal and money's always tight, and we'll probably face a dozen more crises before we're done, especially because of those things. Evelyn smiled. I don't want easy anymore, Cole. I want real. And this, us, the ranch, the life we're making, this is the realest thing I've ever been part of. He pulled her close, and they stood there on the porch of their home, 2 people who'd both been broken in different ways and had somehow helped each other become whole. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Evelyn was no longer the housekeeper. She was the rancher's wife, Cole's partner in running Silver Ridge. They made decisions together, worked side by side, built their future with deliberate care. The new barn was finished just before the first heavy snow. It was larger than the old one, built with better materials and careful planning. On the day they celebrated its completion, Mason carved their initials into one of the support beams, CR and ER, linked together. So people remember, he said when Evelyn questioned it. So they know this was built by people who refused to give up. Elias Grant proved invaluable in managing the ranch's finances. He found ways to cut costs without sacrificing quality, negotiated better prices with suppliers, and kept meticulous records that would have made any banker proud. His wife and daughters visited often, and slowly they became part of the extended Silver Ridge family. Winter came hard that year with snows that buried the valley under 3 feet of white. They were trapped at the ranch for weeks at a time, but Evelyn found she didn't mind. The forced closeness brought them all together in new ways. They played cards by lamplight, told stories, made plans for spring. During one particularly fierce blizzard, while they were all huddled around the fireplace, Mason asked, "What do you miss most about Philadelphia, Evelyn?" She thought about it carefully. The theaters, maybe, the bookstores, being able to walk down a street and see 100 different faces. Do you ever wish you could go back? To visit? Maybe someday. But to live? She looked around the room at these people who'd become her family. No, this is my home now. Even though we're snowed in and going slightly crazy? Even though Cole reached over and squeezed her hand, and in the firelight his face was soft with an emotion he rarely showed in words, but demonstrated constantly in actions. Spring came eventually, as it always did. The snow melted, the creek ran high and fast, and the valley turned green with new growth. They planted crops, bred cattle, made improvements to the ranch that would serve them for years. And one morning in early April, Evelyn woke feeling different. Not sick exactly, but changed. She lay in bed next to Cole, her hand on her stomach, and knew with absolute certainty. She was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with a complex mix of emotions: joy, fear, wonder, responsibility. A child. She and Cole were going to have a child. She didn't tell him right away. She wanted to be sure, wanted to hold the knowledge close for a little while. So she went about her days, keeping the secret, noticing small changes in her body that no one else would see. 2 weeks later, when she was certain, she waited until after dinner when Mason and the hands had gone to the bunkhouse. Cole was doing paperwork at the desk, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Cole?" He didn't look up, still focused on the numbers. "I need to tell you something." Something in her tone made him set down his pen and turn to face her. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I'm fine, better than fine." She took a breath. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, Cole just stared at her, processing the words. Then a smile broke across his face, not his usual slight upturn of lips, but a full, genuine smile that transformed his features. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He was across the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms, his face buried in her hair. "A baby. We're having a baby." "Are you happy?" Evelyn asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy?" He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright. "Evelyn, I'm terrified and thrilled and so damn happy I can barely breathe. When?" "October, I think, around the 1st anniversary of our wedding." "That's perfect. That's—" He stopped, emotion overwhelming him. "I never thought I'd have this. A wife, a family, a real home. I thought I'd just work the ranch until I got too old, then sell it and disappear. But you changed everything." "We changed everything," Evelyn corrected. "Together." That night, lying in bed with Cole's hand protective on her still flat stomach, Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought her here. The train ride west full of hope and naivety, the crushing disappointment of Thomas Brennan's betrayal, the hard work of rebuilding herself from nothing. Every difficulty, every setback, every moment of doubt, they'd all been necessary. They'd shaped her into someone strong enough to survive, brave enough to fight, wise enough to recognize real love when she found it. She'd come west looking for rescue and found something better. She'd found herself. The pregnancy progressed steadily through spring and into summer. Evelyn refused to be coddled, continuing her work around the ranch even as her body changed. Cole worried constantly, but he'd learned not to try to stop her. She had her own sense of what she could and couldn't do. In June, Iron Hollow held its annual summer celebration. It had been postponed the previous year due to tensions with Blackwell, but now, with him safely in prison and the town recovering from his influence, people were eager to celebrate. Evelyn and Cole rode into town for the festivities, joining what seemed like the entire territory in celebration. There were games, food, music, and as evening fell, dancing in the main street. Cole, who claimed he couldn't dance, led Evelyn through a careful waltz while the fiddle played and people clapped. She was 5 months along now, her pregnancy visible, and she caught women smiling at her with a warmth that would have been unimaginable a year ago. "They're happy for us," she said, surprised. "Why wouldn't they be? You're one of them now." Cole spun her carefully. "You earned your place here, Evelyn, not through me, but through your own actions." During a break in the dancing, Sheriff Harding approached them. "Got some news I thought you'd want to hear. Silas Blackwell's appeal was denied. He's staying in prison for the full 15 years. Cole nodded, his face neutral. "Good. There's more. His assets are being sold to cover his debts. The bank's being taken over by a consortium from Denver. They're bringing in new management, new policies. Iron Hollow's getting a fresh start." "And Vivian?" Evelyn asked, curious despite herself. "Married some railroad executive in Chicago. Doubt we'll see her again." Harding tipped his hat. "Anyway, thought you'd want to know justice held." After he left, Evelyn leaned against Cole, watching the celebration continue around them. "Do you feel vindicated?" "I feel relieved, like we can finally stop looking over our shoulders." He kissed the top of her head. "Like we can just live now, without waiting for the next attack." And they did live. Through summer's heat and autumn's cooling, through the changing seasons and the daily work of running a ranch. Evelyn grew larger, moving more carefully, preparing for the child that would arrive soon. In early October, as the leaves turned gold and the air took on that particular crispness that signaled winter's approach, Evelyn felt the first labor pains. She was hanging laundry when it happened, a tightening across her belly that made her pause and breathe through it. For a moment she considered not telling anyone, waiting to be sure. Then another pain came, stronger this time, and she realized there was no waiting. "Cole!" she called, and her voice must have carried the urgency because he came running from the barn, Mason right behind him. "It's time," she said simply. What followed was chaos of the best kind. Mason rode for the midwife, a competent woman named Sarah who lived 2 miles away. Cole helped Evelyn into the house, trying to be calm and failing completely. The ranch hands hovered uselessly until Evelyn sent them away with orders to keep themselves busy. The labor was long and difficult. Evelyn had known childbirth was hard, her mother had told her as much. But nothing prepared her for the reality. The pain, the exhaustion, the primal intensity of bringing a life into the world. But she'd survived worse. She'd survived abandonment, fire, and facing down armed men. She could survive this. 16 hours after the pains began, just as dawn was breaking over the valley, Evelyn's daughter entered the world screaming her fury at being evicted from warmth into cold air. "She's perfect," Sarah the midwife said, placing the tiny red-faced bundle on Evelyn's chest. "Healthy and strong-lunged. You did good, Mrs. Ryder." Evelyn looked down at her daughter, at the tiny perfect fingers, the dark hair, the face scrunched in infant rage, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. This was love, pure and fierce and unconditional. This was what she'd been moving toward all along, even when she didn't know it. Cole appeared in the doorway, his face pale with worry. "Evelyn, come meet your daughter," she said, smiling through exhaustion. He crossed the room carefully, as if afraid he might break something, and looked down at the baby with an expression of complete wonder. "She's so small." "She's perfect." Evelyn handed the baby to him, watching as his large scarred hands cradled her with infinite gentleness. "What should we name her?" They discussed names, but never settled on one. Now, looking at this tiny person who'd changed everything, Cole said, "Rose. After my mother, if that's all right with you. Rose Ryder." Evelyn tested the name. "Yes, that's exactly right." Over the following weeks, life adjusted to accommodate the newest member of the Silver Ridge family. Rose was a demanding baby, hungry often, sleeping in short bursts, requiring constant attention. But Evelyn had never been happier, even in her exhaustion. The ranch hands took turns helping with chores so she could rest. Mason proved surprisingly good with the baby, walking her around the property when she fussed. Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Grant visited often, bringing food and advice and the camaraderie of women who'd survived childbirth themselves. And Cole, stern, scarred Cole, who'd once seemed so hard, transformed completely around his daughter. Evelyn would find him at odd hours just watching Rose sleep, his face soft with an emotion too big for words. "I never thought I'd have this," he told Evelyn one night, holding Rose while Evelyn tried to eat dinner. "A family. People who depend on me not because I pay their wages, but because we choose each other." "We do choose each other," Evelyn confirmed. Every day. Winter came and went. Rose grew, her personality emerging. Stubborn, like both her parents, curious about everything, quick to laugh, and quick to rage. Spring brought new life to the valley, and with it, new plans for Silver Ridge. They expanded the cattle operation, hired 2 more ranch hands, began negotiations with eastern buyers for better beef prices. Elias Grant's careful management meant they were profitable for the first time in years, able to save money and plan for the future. On a warm day in May, almost exactly 1 year after Rose's birth, Evelyn stood on the porch watching the valley. Rose was asleep inside, exhausted from a morning of exploring every corner of the house. Cole was out with the hands, moving cattle to summer pasture. The house was quiet, and Evelyn realized she was completely, utterly content. Not because life was perfect, it wasn't. They still struggled with money sometimes, still had difficult days, still argued occasionally about the best way to run the ranch. Rose was a handful, the work was endless, and there were still people in town who whispered about the Eastern woman who'd married Cole Ryder. But none of that mattered. Because she'd built something real here, something that belonged to her in a way nothing ever had before. She heard hoofbeats and turned to see Cole riding up, dusty and tired but smiling when he saw her. He dismounted, climbed the porch steps, and pulled her into his arms. "How was your day?" he asked. "Good. Rose discovered the chickens. That was an adventure." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I can imagine. She's going to be trouble when she's older." "She already is." Evelyn leaned into him, comfortable in his embrace. "But she's our trouble." They stood there together, watching the sun track across the sky, and Evelyn thought about all the ways her life could have gone. If Thomas Brennan had actually shown up, she might be trapped in a loveless marriage with a con artist. If she'd run back to Philadelphia, she'd be living under her father's disappointment. If she'd been too afraid to take the housekeeper job, too proud to accept help, too cautious to fight back, she'd have missed all of this. The ranch, the family, the life she'd built through courage and stubbornness and refusing to give up. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, reading her expression. "How lucky I am. How strange it is that getting abandoned was the best thing that ever happened to me." "Not abandoned," Cole said firmly. "Let go. There's a difference. Brennan let you go because he was a fool, but that meant you were free to find something better." Evelyn considered that reframing. Yes, not abandoned, released, set free from expectations that would have slowly crushed her, given the chance to discover who she really was beneath all the layers of propriety and fear. "You're right," she said. "I was set free, and I flew." That evening, after Rose was fed and settled for the night, after dinner was cleared and the ranch was settling into darkness, Evelyn found herself back on the porch. It had become her habit, this evening vigil, time to think and breathe and appreciate what she had. Cole joined her, as he always did, carrying 2 cups of coffee. They sat in the chairs they'd placed there specifically for this purpose and watched the stars emerge. "Mason wants to buy that property to the north," Cole said after a while. "The old Henderson place. Thinks he's ready to start his own operation." "Is he?" "Probably. He's learned everything I can teach him. Time for him to build something of his own." Cole sipped his coffee. "I'll miss having him here, though. It's been good having him around." "He'll still be close, and we can help him get started the way you helped him." Evelyn smiled. "That's what family does." "Yeah." Cole was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about family a lot lately, about how it's not just blood, it's choice. You, me, Rose, Mason, the Grants, we chose each other. That makes it stronger somehow." Evelyn thought about her family in Philadelphia, her father, distant and disappointed, the relatives who'd judged her for coming west. She hadn't heard from them since leaving, and that was fine. They'd never really known her anyway. This was her family now. These rough, honest, hard-working people who'd stood with her when things got difficult, who celebrated her successes and supported her through failures, who chose her every day as she chose them. "I want to tell Rose about this someday," Evelyn said suddenly. "When she's old enough to understand, I want to tell her that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you opens the door to the best thing. That courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done anyway. That home isn't a place or a person, but a feeling you build through work and love and refusing to give up. That's a lot of wisdom for one small girl. She's going to need it. The world isn't easy, especially for women, but if she learns that she can survive anything, that setbacks aren't endings but redirections, maybe she'll be braver than I was." Cole reached over and took her hand. "You're the bravest person I know, Evelyn. Don't ever doubt that." They sat in comfortable silence as the night deepened. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The wind moved through the grass with a sound like whispered secrets. Inside, their daughter slept, safe and loved. And Evelyn realized that this ordinary evening on a frontier ranch, drinking coffee with the man she loved while their child slept peacefully, this was the adventure she'd been seeking all along. Not grand drama or sweeping romance, just the daily choice to keep building, keep growing, keep loving despite fear and difficulty. Just the courage to say yes to life, even when it looked nothing like what she'd planned. She'd come west as Evelyn Mercer, running toward a fantasy. She'd become Evelyn Ryder, standing firm on ground she'd claimed through courage. And she'd learned the most important lesson of all. You don't find yourself in the destination. You find yourself in the journey, in the choices you make when life breaks your plans. in the person you become when you refuse to let hardship define you. Thomas Brennan had done her a favor, though he'd never know it. By abandoning her, he'd freed her to discover her own strength, to build a life based on what she wanted, not what others expected, to become someone she could be proud of. The abandoned bride had become the rancher's wife, the mother, the fighter, the survivor. But more importantly, she'd become herself. And beneath the endless western sky, with starlight painting silver across the valley and the man she loved beside her, Evelyn finally understood the truth she'd been moving toward all along. She had never been left behind. She had been riding toward home the entire time. She just hadn't known what home looked like until she built it with her own hands.